ones which theoretically should be okay.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Waverley Local Committee. I am Victoria Young, the Chairman of the Local Committee and Divisional Member for Waverley Eastern Villages. Thank you all for coming today. Thank you especially to members of the public. Please note that this meeting is being webcast. Housekeeping, the loos are through the doors to the side of us. And the emergency procedure, in the event of an emergency, the building must be evacuated. Please exit immediately. And the emergency meeting point is on the green adjacent to the Berries car park and Crown Court car park. Councillors and members of the public should accompany me and officers and remain together until the senior officer present has accounted for everybody. So I will now ask members and officers to introduce themselves. I'll perhaps start with Councillor Mrs Baker.
Sorry, just familiarising myself with the iPad.
If you would like to just introduce yourself, please.
Certainly.
Could you put the microphone on, please, and move the microphone towards you? Thank you.
Thank you. I should know by now. I'm Christine Baker. I'm councillor representing Milford Ward. But actually, I will just mention I live in Hambledon and I'm a Waverley councillor.
Good morning, I'm Nikki Barton. I'm County Councillor for Haslemere and Town Councillor for Haslemere South.
Good morning, I'm Peter Clark, the Borough Councillor for Recklesham and Routledge in Farnham.
Carol Coburn, Waverley Councillor for Farnham Bourne.
Steve Cossa, a Waverley Councillor for Charles House Ward, reappearing after 2 years, previously here as a County Councillor. Thank you.
John Gray, Waverley Councillor for Chiddingfold and Dunsfold.
Councillor Jerry Hyman, Waverley Councillor for Farnham Firgrove.
Good morning, I'm Peter Martin. I'm the County Councillor for Godalming South for Milford and Whitley. I'm also a Borough Councillor and a Town Councillor.
Hello everyone, Mark Merriweather. I'm a Town Councillor and Waverley Borough Councillor for Farnham, Webburn and Badshot Lee, and I'm on the Waverley Borough Exec.
Good morning, I'm Andrew Povey. I'm County Councillor for Cranley and Newhurst.
Good morning, I'm Wyatt Ramsdale. I'm the County Councillor for Farnham South.
I'm Stephen Spence. I'm the Surrey County Councillor for Farnham North.
Liz Townsend, Waverley Borough Councillor for Cranley West and Chairman of Cranley Parish Council.
George Wilson, Waverley Borough Councillor for Godalming and Cattershall.
Thank you.
I better do it. David Harmer, County Councillor for Waverley Western Villages, which means from the edge of Farnham in the west to Brook in the east.
I'm Frank Apicella. I'm the Area Highway Manager for Guildford and Waverley.
Good morning, Adrian Selby, Senior Engineer for Waverley.
Yvette Ortel, Committee Officer, Surrey County Council.
Matt Furness, I'm County Councillor for Shalford Division, your neighbour. I'm Cabinet Member for Highways on Surrey County Council.
Thank you very much, everybody. I'd particularly like to welcome Mr Furness, who's here to deal with various highways matters for us today. So we'll now move to informal public questions, which we've got half an hour allotted for. So I'd be pleased to welcome questions from the public. I believe, first of all, that there's a question from John Jeffrey. Would you like to put your question, please, Mr Jeffrey?
Thank you. Can you hear me? I am a Hascombe resident living in Markwick Lane, close to its junction with the B2130, and I represent the village on the Waverley District Committee of the CPRE. My question is, what does your committee intend to do to mitigate the adverse effects of far too much traffic using Markwick Lane, Salt Lane, Station Lane and through Milford to the A3 as a currently vital east-west traffic link. The effects I'm referring to include the following: damage to the tranquility and beauty of the Surrey Hills A and B by the passage of too many unsuitably large commercial vehicles, also causing damage to its ancient banks and trees, air pollution, particularly from the running engines of stationary traffic in the narrow parts, dangerous speed and noise in the mile of road approaching the B213A, delays and damage to vehicles caused by potholes which are too infrequently and not well repaired, fly tipping, danger to cyclists, incalculable economic loss and individual stress from unforeseen hold-ups in the narrow parts, inconvenience to local residents along the lanes and at the high-style end, damage to their properties from the too close proximity of HGVs. These effects will be aggravated by extra traffic from the Dunsfield Park housing scheme has been completed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jeffrey. As you'll have seen at item 8 on our agenda, we are discussing the traffic on this very road, Markwick Lane. So if I may, I'd like to deal with answering your question at the same time as question 8 on the agenda, so that we end up having just one discussion on Markwick Lane and HGVs on rural roads, rather than ending up with a sort of split discussion. So if I may, I'll just park you there for the moment and we'll come back to you when we get to item 8 on the agenda.
Yes, thank you. I've got 1 or 2 copies if anyone wants a copy of the question.
Thank you. Do I have any other informal questions?
Pardon me. Thank you, Madam Chairman. My name is Andrew Bolton and I'm a member of the public. There is an element of youth antisocial behaviour, especially in the summer evenings in Godalming. I have been told by some officers that Surrey County Council has recently reorganised and not yet formalised its youth work. And this is frustrating local volunteers who wish to improve facilities for young people. When will we have some surety about the reorganisation? Thank you.
Mr. Bolton, thank you for that question. I don't think we have anybody here who's in a position to answer that question properly. Yvette is happy to take the question away and come back to you with an email answer, if that would be acceptable to you. Thank you. Mrs. Ames.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Sorry, excuse me. I have the question here in front of me, but I'm not sure if it's appropriate at this stage, because I think it's being dealt with this way, because I asked, by the way, a former borough councillor, parish councillor and a few other things as well, but a resident in the area, very much involved with all of this for many years, regarding the structure of the Waverley Local Committee and its future. The committee holds a crucial position in the way forward for Waverley, and I urge members of the public to attend, but please can the subject of a joint committee be a firm agenda item in future, as has happened with other local committees across the county. But I understand that this is being dealt with today, is on the agenda for today with the presence of Matt Furness.
I'm afraid, Mrs. Ames, I think you're mistaken in thinking that it's on the agenda because Matt's here. What I can say about joint committees is that it is still something we are looking at, but we're also looking at joint partnership boards, which would meet in private and bring in other bodies like, for example, health and so on and so forth, bodies which are obviously very important to our local residents, but people like the NHS, you know, are not interested in being harangued by politicians and would much rather meet in private. The current Guildford Surrey Board meets in private, and its initial works have been, I think, very successful. Mr Furness, do you wish to add anything to that?
I think it would just be key to say that we would not be removing public engagements. There would always be a public forum session, particularly because highways matters are always very top of the agenda, and we would need the local involvement in that. But the Guildford Surrey Board has worked as a good example. It's brought education, health and other partners in so that they can start working with both Surrey and Guildford Borough Councils in actually progressing the agendas.
And thank you for that, Madam Chairman, because the one thing that we mustn't lose is the input and support of members of the public at this level. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Do I have any other public questions? No? Good. Right.
I'm not sure which section mine comes in. It's the response to a written reply.
No, that comes in a little bit later.
Is that later? Thank you.
So I now move to the formal agenda and the formal local committee. Item 1, apologies. We've received apologies from Penny Rivers and also from Andy MacLeod, who will be joining us a little late. Item 2, the minutes of the last meeting on the 22nd of March. Yes. Yes, of course.
I didn't think the minute, it's the final bit under the heading Member Discussion Key Points.
Which?
8. Electronic page 8. It's the same page, is it? Yeah. So it's headed up Member Discussion Key Points, yeah. And the point was that we had a discussion about whether Transportation Development Control could come to the meeting to explain their policies as to when they may or may not object to a large planning application. Because I think there's no doubt that my residents don't understand the system. And I don't think that was quite reflected in the minute. And the comment in the minute that because we don't have jurisdiction for planning means this would be inappropriate doesn't make sense. We don't have jurisdiction for the police, but we had the police come along, I think, at our last meeting to tell us about what their activities in Waverley. So I think the minute is not quite correct in terms of reflecting what was discussed.
Would you like to propose an amendment?
I think I would delete the sentence about we're not being a forum for planning and therefore we shouldn't have it. I would have thought that there's a discussion regarding highway planners. I think almost you could just delete the second sentence and leave the first one. There was a discussion regarding SCC highway planners attending a future meeting to discuss their policies.
Yeah.
Keep it as simple as that.
Yeah.
I would support that.
Yeah. Is that agreed?
Yeah, agreed.
Agreed. Thank you very much. So can I take that the minutes with that amendment are approved?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Declarations of interest, item 3. Please could members declare if they have any disclosable pecuniary interest in respect of any item to be discussed.
Declare an interest as a trustee of Surrey Hills Society.
Thank you. Mr Martin.
I'm a board member of Surrey Hills Enterprises.
Thank you. Right. Item 4, Chairman's announcements. I'd like to thank Richard Hampson, who stood down from being a councillor, for his service to this committee. And I'd like to welcome Nikki Barton as the new county councillor for Hazelmere. And I'd also like to welcome all the other new members of the local committee, although some have been here before. Councillors Baker, Clark, Cossa, Gray, Merriweather and Wilson. So we now move to item 5, petitions, and we have received 2 petitions. First of all, are the petitioners Leslie Ross and Mara Plater present? Yeah.
Present.
Mrs. Ross, you may speak for up to 3 minutes on your petition.
Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity to address you today about the concerns highlighted in our letter sent to you in March this year. We hope you have a copy of this and have seen our petition signed by 61 residents. Unfortunately, we have not been able to read the current report, but I will continue anyway. Holmead consists of 44 homes, mostly council built after the war. There are now a mixture of owner-occupied and rented properties. All are well kept, and whilst many have drives or parking areas, not all benefit in this way. Houses and bungalows originally designed for older people are now more often occupied by younger people with families, and their homes are further away from parking spaces. This can be difficult when carrying shopping or escorting children, so car owners therefore park on the nearby grass areas. More households have cars now, sometimes several, and there are also a number of commercial vehicles used by residents. More households receive deliveries from supermarkets and mail order.
As a consequence of the restricted parking space, there are often several vehicles parked wholly on the verges and pavements. Over time, the state of the road and its grass verges have deteriorated because of the increased numbers of cars, vans and lorries which use the road daily. Because of parked vehicles at the side of the road, vehicles regularly have to mount the pavement and verges in order to pass. Especially in wet weather, the verges are churned up and are no longer as attractive as they were. We think that the state of the road, verges and pavements devalues the properties and puts off purchasers when properties are for sale. We feel that this lets down the overall appearance of an area of outstanding beauty. We are very concerned that, at a busy time such as evening or weekend, an emergency vehicle would not be able to get to properties, especially at the far end. We would urge you to consider the following: redesign the paths and grassed areas to provide a wider road and additional parking spaces, remove or decrease the width of the grass verges, resurface the entire road. We hope that you will consider our proposal seriously, and we thank you for your time for listening.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Plater, you may now speak for 3 minutes on your petition.
I haven't written something to write out. I did more of a sort of PowerPoint, but I've got, shall I just read out my bullet points? So the areas of concern down Critchmere Hill and Woolmer Hill Road, discouraging the natural urge of drivers to speed down Critchmere Hill and Woolmer Hill. Critchmere Hill and Woolmer Hill has a busy pedestrian use due to the number of families with young children now living on the hill, as well as the daily route for children attending Woolmer Hill School. Younger families that have moved onto the hill over the last decade have increased the younger population. It's now a hill with a lot of children using the pavements. We've already had 2 3 to 4 bedroom houses built on Critchmere Hill. In the not too distant future, there's a chance that the Royal Oak pub at the bottom of the hill will be used for more housing, increasing the population on the hill. And the pavements are a busy thoroughfare between 8 and 8:45 and 5:15 and 4 p.m. as children walk to and from Woolmer Hill School. Poorly designed junction between the top of Critchmere Hill and Hindhead Road, the layout of the junction promotes a range of dangerous driving behaviours, from mounting the pavement to dangerous driving manoeuvres as a result of waiting cars on the Hindhead Road. The continued mounting of vehicles on the pavement has led to the pavement becoming degraded, and in such instances are pushing prams up the hill very challenging. The driveways existing onto both Critchmere Hill and Woolmer Hill suffer from inconsiderate drivers and increased risk of accidents due to the speed and unawareness of drivers using the road. Many times, vehicles driving down the hill force themselves up against the exiting vehicle, regardless of how far they have come. And I read the report last night, and it seems that I think our road is due to be looked at this year/next year. So I think with the speed bumps, that's going to make a huge difference. The main thing really is at the top of the road, the Hindhead Road and the Critchmere Hill Junction. It's just working out how we can stop, because you can't fit 2 cars there. That's the biggest challenge. So.
Thank you very much. Members, I apologise, I've made a slight mess of the order of things. I'm afraid now we need to go back to Shamley Green and Hullmead. Do any members have any questions on any of that for the officer, or otherwise I shall go to Frank to just say a few words, please. No? Mr. Apicella?
Thank you. Yes, you will have seen the response and hopefully had an opportunity to have read it. We have provided a joint response both from Surrey County Council and Waverley. The issue we have predominantly in Hullmead is that it's a road that was built many years ago with lack of any parking provision. A lot of the housing stock that was built at that stage had no parking provision allowed for it whatsoever. So hence the response also from Waverley. I felt it was important that they or have an input into this. The issue we have from a highway perspective is that, and I think there has been a plan put in there in the agenda of the area showing exactly what land is owned and is public highway, which in actual fact is very little. We virtually own up to the edge of the road plus any footway and or verge that exists alongside the carriageway. So there's very little scope to widen the road to provide parking, albeit as a highway authority, our jurisdiction is very much for passing and repassing. So our remit is to ensure that vehicular traffic can pass along a road, not necessarily park on it. So what we tend to do is when vehicles are obstructed and they cannot pass, that's when we use our other tool in our arsenal, which are waiting restrictions, to prevent the road from being obstructed. So the only opportunity we have there really is to introduce waiting restrictions, which may not be necessarily the answer that you'd like, because all it does is prevent vehicles from parking there, which is why the input from Waverley is very important, in as much as they may be able, not this year but next year, look at providing some off-road parking in some of their green areas, because they do own a vast area of green away from the public highway, where they may be able to provide parking for their residents off the highway.
Do you want to come back with any further supplementary question?
Yes, I just wondered if nothing else can be done, whether you would consider taking 18 inches to a foot off of one side of the grass verge, just so that it doesn't look like a churned up field.
Yes, it could be done. However, all I would say is the funding would have to come from this committee. That funding for that sort of undertaking doesn't exist. The likelihood is that it's not just a case of widening it by 18 inches. Those verges and footways are probably absolutely stuffed with utility plant, and to lower and move that would actually cost more than the widening. So it is something that this committee could consider, but I suspect it would come at a very high cost, which is why the Waverley option is the better one in the longer term. Although weighting restrictions, if that was also appropriate, could be looked at.
What does weighting restrictions involve?
Yellow lines.
Right, thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Coburn.
I was just going to suggest that we could offer Mrs. Ross some comfort in as much as the Waverley people that have seen your petition, the Waverley councillors, and we can make sure that it doesn't slip, that it is actually brought to the attention of both, you know, the housing officers, obviously, and also the relevant ONS committee that looks over it. So, you know, we can promise you it won't get forgotten. We can't promise you a solution, but we can at least make sure it goes through the system for you.
Mrs. Townsend.
Thank you. I was just going to say that this is obviously a common problem across Waverley and also across some of Waverley's own housing. And it's a problem also in Cranley, and I have met with some of the Surrey Highways people previously about grass verges being totally eroded. Obviously, there's an added issue here with the width of the road as well. But Waverley is currently looking at its housing and parking spaces, as Councillor Coburn has said, but also the strategy for electric vehicle charging points as well across of its housing as well. So that would need to be a holistic project, because it's no good providing parking and doing that work if you're not also going to perhaps put in some electric charging points as well. So I think that it is something that, as Councillor Coburn said, that is being looked at Waverley across their own.
See whether Chris can press things forward with Waverley, and let's see where we go from there.
Thank you very much.
Right, thank you. Apologies, Mrs. Plater. So it's now on to the response from you. First of all, do I have any comments from members on... Thank you for that helpful information. So, I think perhaps the most useful thing is, as you're in my division, that we will arrange to meet with Chris Howard, your local borough councillor, and we can the Hazelmere sort of area petition. Mrs. Barton.
Thank you. I really support this request because Walmer Hill is a really busy thoroughfare. It's a cut through to town from the A3. It has Walmer Hill, which is the town's main secondary school, and a nursery school, and it's there's a large amount of...
I think they said that the speed bumps could be improved, which is great, but it's really also the junction at the top of Critchmere Hill and Walmer Hill Road, and we took some photos and things of like lorries mounting the curb, and I appreciate bollards can't be put because the
housing around there. So I really appreciate the highways response. I think that's it is positive. And I would just really request that it's expedited if possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? No? Mr. Apicella, do you want to say anything on the response? Would you like to come back with any further question?
I think they said that the speed bumps could be improved, which is great, but it's really also the junction at the top of Critchmere Hill and Walmer Hill Road, and we took some photos and things of like lorries mounting the curb, and I appreciate bollards can't be put because the pavement isn't wide enough and that sort of thing, but we wondered if maybe you know, road hash or something like that with extra signage could be a possibility. But I wasn't sure, but we just came up with that idea. Oh.
Could I suggest that perhaps you would like to maybe arrange a site meeting with Mrs. Barton and the petitioner and Mr. Selby, and you could take this matter offline to see if that can be progressed?
Yeah, I'd be very happy to do that.
Thank you. So we now move to item 6, the written public questions. For those of you on paper copies, there's a separate small small bundle of papers for this. 3 public questions have been received, and please see the answers on the supplementary agenda. First of all, we have a question from Councillor Hess. Mr. Hess, would you like to ask a supplementary question?
Good morning, everybody. I hope this fine day finds you all in good fettle and in generous mood. I've had a response to a written question from a senior highways engineer for Surrey County Highways concerning my written question to do with the condition of the carriageway, mainly eastbound, on the A31 as you approach the Coxbridge roundabout in Farnham. And thank you very much for the reply. So concerning the resurfacing of the eastbound carriageway of the A31, which is adjacent to the Coxbridge trading estate, very busy, and measures to deal with the considerable pooling of surface water by the entrance, which during recent rains almost covered the carriageway. It was incredibly bad.
Please, could we have a question, Mr. Hess?
I will get to it.
We are timing it today.
I would like to just respond to the timing, because the answer I received was that the work would be looked at during Q1, between Q1 and Q3 of 2020-2021, which, quite frankly, is way too late. It needs to be done now. So I would urge Surrey Highways to reconsider this scheduling and bring it forward to this year. Would you review and respond, please?
Thank you, Councillor Hess. Yes, you will also see from the response that because the carriageway, as you're well aware, is in a very poor state, shall we say. Yeah. The patching element of it is going to be carried out next month or in August to at least ameliorate it in the short term. Longer term, which is what the response goes more into detail about, revolves more around the drainage. There is a huge drainage problem there that needs to be investigated and rectified. That is what is programmed for Q1 and Q3 in latter years, because once that is done, then the final carriageway resurfacing can be done and we can walk away from it. At least in the short term, we have to patch it because it'll all have to be dug up again once they have to do the drainage works.
Yes. Yes, you can very quickly.
Very quickly. It is a very important issue. Frank, I really appreciate that, and I do understand it's a big engineering issue, but is there no chance it can be actually brought forward into this year at all?
No. Thank you. Right. Secondly, we have a question from Alistair Smith, Chairman of the Guildford Society. Is Mr. Smith here? No. Well, you'll see the answer given by Mike Green. For the benefit of members, I spoke to Colin Kemp this morning, who told me, notwithstanding Mike Green's response, he is prepared to look into some sort of feasibility study to see what the possibilities might be of some sort of link road between Colin Kemp, who's the Deputy Leader of Surrey and in charge of infrastructure matters. He's prepared to look in to see what the possibilities might be of some sort of link road between the Dunsfold, Cranley area and Milford and the A3. So moving on then, the third question from Mr. Osborne. Would you like to ask a supplementary question?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, my supplementary question is that Mike Green hasn't really answered my question. He's just said that there will be money available. I just need a solution, and it needs to be a strategic solution.
Mr Osborne, I think it would be 7 written member questions. 1 member question has been received from Councillor Peter Clark, and the question and answer are included on the supplementary agenda. Councillor Clark, would you like to ask a supplementary?
Yes, thank you.
To deal with your question more in item 8, when Mr Furness is talking about Markwick Lane, etc. And if you don't mind, we'll perhaps sort of hold over and I'll let you come back again when we're in that item. Thank you. Right, moving on.
A supplementary question, well, 2 parts really. Would Councillor Povey's review, would that include input from borough councillors? And secondly, I'm not expecting you to visit every CRC around Surrey, but some photographs of each one for you might be useful, especially Farnham, which since it opened, I think 30 years ago, nothing has been done to the Farnham site, and it's getting to the point that it's dangerous.
Thank you. Well, we're fortunate to have Dr Povey with us. Perhaps Dr Povey could say a few words.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for the question. Just to remind members, I think because there's a lot of new members here, the task group has been set up to try and avoid the closure of the 4 least used CRCs, but its remit goes a bit beyond that. So it's looking for alternative savings so that we don't have to close the 4 CRCs. Also looking how we might increase recycling in general. And the third element is to look at a longer term strategy for waste within Surrey, particularly in light of the DEFRA consultation which came out back in about February time. Which is just about to close off, or has just closed off, I think. So there's quite a lot of work there. We have had some visits to some of the CRCs. We've also had evidence gathering sessions to which Waverley was invited, but I think you were, at that point in time, the council was not fully organised, shall I say, after the recent elections. So there will be a second session to which you will be invited, and we would certainly welcome input from Waverley. You know, very much with a view of cost savings and looking to the future, and we would welcome those comments.
Thank you very much. Do you want to say anything more?
Oh, that's answered the question. Thank you. Look forward to getting the invitations.
Thank you very much. So we now move to item 8. I'm very pleased to welcome Matt Furness, the Surrey County Council Cabinet Member for Highways. He's going to provide us with an update on highways in general and rural rat runs in particular, as we discussed at the meeting on the 22nd of March. Over to you, Matt.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, good morning, everyone. Thank you for allowing me to come along today. I'm following my predecessor, Councillor Kemp's footsteps, to come around and introduce myself to all the local and joint committees, hear any local issues that you particularly would like to raise with me, and also to continue with giving updates as we go on, because, as you can imagine, highways, we get a lot of, pretty much most of the contact with the public, as everyone does use our network. I just want to start by thanking all of you for pooling your funding from your highways allocation. Not all local committees have done that, but it's good to see that you are all able to work together and help out the highways team. And I do urge you to follow the advice for your remaining amount and allow them to guide you on where that can be most efficiently and best spent. We are continuing our winter maintenance investment into this year. We spent £12 million last year on top of what we normally did. That's an additional £8 million this year. 20 million overall over 2 years. I hope you can agree we are seeing the results. It is an improvement on the network, but we will have to go further forward, and that's what we're currently doing as a team by looking at our asset base. We have a huge network. The priority roads in particular are actually a small part of that network. It's actually C and D roads, which is your side roads, cul-de-sacs and everything, which makes up the large majority. And I'm looking in particular at how we can put more money into pavements. Even a couple of million will actually have a significant improvement. So we're just looking at our asset base at the moment and just seeing where we can put that funding to get a better outcome for more sustainable transport. Coming on to the next Cabinet agenda will be a Town Centre Agreements paper. This is where we're working with districts and boroughs very closely, ones that want to use higher quality materials, want to take ownership of the town centre, such as Woking have done, Epsom and Ewell and Guildford, where they're wanting to regenerate their town centres. And actually start managing it. We're putting this forward because we really do want districts and boroughs to be involved, engaged, and have a little bit more say over their town centres and how they work. Something that I'm sure everyone will notice, we've got LED rollout starting in September, October this year. This is for all the street lights. We've recently on the PFI replaced, I think it's about 80,000 lamp columns. We're now going to be replacing the bulbs with LED. This is not only environmentally friendlier, it gives us greater control over what levels of light that we're able to do, but it's also a large revenue saving because energy costs for the county are in the millions just on street lights, and we are seeing what we can do to save as much as possible. This week, I was very privileged to be part of the opening of the Surrey Infrastructure Academy. This is something we've done with our contractor, Kia, as part of the last extension of the contract. We do have a skills shortage in London and the South East, and particularly training facilities to be able to train people to go into highways. So what we've done with Kia is we've now got 4 colleges across the county with highways elements actually on the degree courses that they can take. So we are starting to train within Surrey the people we need to actually take forward our infrastructure with the new technology and a younger workforce as well. And just very lastly, I hope you can all agree we've had a recent change in our drainage contractor. We have seen a marked improvement over the 2 years where we have been doing a lot of gully cleanings, jettings, and the contractor has seamlessly changed over, but we will continue to be working on all the drainage elements. The recent rains for the past, well, I think it was last week now, has shown that we had our lowest ever level of recorded incidences about highways flooding. So that was really good, and we're going to continue that programme. So, Madam Chairman, I don't know if anyone would like to ask any questions on that bit, or do you want us to just roll straight on to HGVs?
I think it might be sensible that we deal with the general first, and we'll deal with the more specific issue kind of separately. So if anybody would like to ask questions on the more general matters, Mr. Cossa, first of all.
Yes, thank you very much. I was very interested in your comment about working with borough councils on regeneration of town centres. I'm also a member of the Town Council in Godalming and also Vice Chairman of the Surrey Association of all local parish and town councils. And one of the things that's been happening in recent years, as I'm sure you're aware, is that because parish and town councils are uncapped, particularly in some of the areas with larger town councils, a lot of the work on initiatives around town centres have often been led or by town and parish councils, or they've been a significant partner with the borough. So I think my comment and my question really is, could you please ensure that in those discussions the town and parish councils have an opportunity to contribute quite directly, because sometimes that is where the impetus for this sort of work actually rests at the present time.
My question was on the same subject. Could I just perhaps ask that?
Okay, Mr. Martin.
I was also interested in the town centre agreements you talked about. You talked about using higher quality materials. Could you explain what you mean by that, please, Matt? Thank you.
Thank you, yes. So I'm quite happy for town and parish councils because it will be an agreement between the county and the district and borough. So yes, we're happy to get you involved, particularly with if Waverley Borough Council wanted to do anything, then I'm sure they would get you involved. On the higher quality materials, if you look at Woking in particular, they are actually not only managing the type of material. Surrey County Council will stick to our favourite tarmac, but if you're wanting higher quality slabs or anything else, such as in the Tunsgate in Guildford or what they're doing in the Woking regeneration, we're encouraging actually the districts and boroughs to take on ownership for that maintenance. For paying for that, we also will hand over any licensing fees and everything else in order for cafes, restaurants to be on the pavements there, on the pedestrianised zones, in order to help them facilitate that funding. So it's not something that the County Council is willing to take on as a maintenance revenue liability, but the districts and boroughs are very keen to, because they're the ones that know their area and want to drive that economic success, which we're happy to support.
Thank you. Mr Ramsdale.
Thank you. I find myself very much in agreement with Councillor Coster on this. I think, Councillor Furnish, you need to appreciate that in Waverley, there isn't one Waverley with one town centre in the way that you're perhaps fortunate or unfortunate to have in Guildford, and that almost 4 agreements for each town would be a better way forward. And indeed, I think if you have an agreement that includes the town council, it can also include the opportunity, or dare I say, contractual agreement for the town to contribute some of the money, because I know that SIL is coming in Waverley. Many of the town councils will have a 25% stake of that, so they won't be short of funds for block paving or whatever the extras are. So I think a single agreement with Waverley would be missing an opportunity in the way that having an agreement that includes the town, the borough and the county would be a step improvement.
I'll take Dr Povey next, because I think it's on the same issue.
It's the same issue, and echoing what other members have said, but just remembering Cranley as a village, so we do hope that the word town encompasses village.
Mr Burton, do you want to...
As I said before with Mr Gossett, I don't have an issue. I do understand Waverley is quite unique in the way that it is spread out. My division alone has 9 parish councils, so I know each one is very different, and they have very different priorities. I personally don't have an issue. I will check with the team to see whether we can legally do so. I think it was only really with the districts and boroughs because they have that that larger base in order to facilitate. But if town councils and village want to do that, I don't see why that should be an issue.
Thank you. Now, Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. Going from town centres to what I'm going to ask seems a way down, but I have had complaints in my ward about the inability of the gully cleaning to be done because of commuter parking. I know that they put a lot of notices out, but it does seem that quite a few roads have to get missed because they can't move the parking. I'm wondering if there is a way you could control that.
The answer is yes, but maybe if you want to drop me an email or have a chat with me maybe at the end, we can resolve that quite specific query.
Thank you. Mrs Coburn.
Yes, my question is really about sort of implementation. We have got a Farnham Conservation Area Management Plan, which was written by Surrey County Council, Waverley Borough Council, Farnham Town Council, Farnham Society, a whole load of people. And I remember saying when we signed it off, I do hope that when the work is done, that the person at the top who signed the agreement to do work in a conservation area of a certain standard, by the time it filters down to the chap with the tarmac and the spoon, you know, will it actually be that same work? And we've got to the stage, the town council is very proactive, as you probably know, probably a bit too much, but we do try and put in money, following Councillor Ramsdale, we do actually put in money to get the finish as we want it. But what my problem is the temporary work that you do in conservation areas or anywhere. And we've got to the stage where we're almost frightened to tell you there's a little fault, because what you come out and do before you perhaps come up with the final solution is awful. You know, it's plastic, it's bright orange and, you know, or whatever, and it's tarmac, because any solution is tarmac, as we know. Surrey love tarmac and metal, whereas the towns love wood and stone and flint and anything else, you know. So, you know, I fully appreciate this, and I will do everything I can to work as a Waverley and a town councillor to get Farnham's input. But, you know, I do think we have to have the reassurance that what is being implemented is what we actually want to be implemented. And that, I think, has always been a slight problem in this working together. I know what we think we've agreed, Surrey knows what it thinks it's agreed, and that temporary work is always a nightmare.
We are going very specific today. Yes, well, we can. If you like, I am going to be staying behind because I've already got 3 people who want to have a chat with me privately. We can run through those specific issues. The only thing I would say about the temporary works is they are there, and if once we know about something, we have to put it safe, and that's quite important because we are liable, and the taxpayer is paying the money over to the county. So what I would say is it would only be done if it is needed in order to be safe to prevent any other issues. In regards to the sort of the final works, happy to have a chat with Frank and yourself about that, maybe just after the meeting, and we can maybe get some specific examples that we can take back.
Thank you, Matt. I can echo that because I've had a problem in my division where some small repairs on some ancient cobbles look just terrible, and it's whether there is a plan to, well, understand the need for the immediate temporary repair, but whether they're ever going to be brought back up to the nice old cobbled look. Anyway, Mrs. Barton, I think, was next.
Really just echoing the conversation that's preceded. And at Hazelmere, we have a design statement that was spent many years drawing up, the kind of code of what the town wanted to see going forwards. And I'd really ask that this was all really, really considered, because these communities have spent a lot of time drawing up what they would like, how they would like their community to continue to look. And so I think it'd be great if they were formally considered in this project of going forward. Thank you.
Mrs. Townsend.
Thank you. 2 small things. One, I'd like to thank Highways for the work that they did on Banks Buildings Road in Cranley, and the replacement of the cobbles looks great. Thank you very much. Hopefully they'll last a long time, won't need patching. And the other thing is just a general question, really, is that in Cranley we are experiencing some new pavements being input in what were otherwise country lanes, which has involved an awful lot of trees being chopped down. And on my discussions with Highways, it appears that there is no biodiversity, no ecology study done prior to the trees being taken down. So is there any responsibility on Highways when they put in new pavements which are agreed outside of a site red line boundary? Are there any studies done to ensure that there are no nesting birds, no bat roosting, etc. in the trees? Because my concern is that there could have been a significant tree. There were some significant trees, but there could have been a beautiful old oak, so to speak, and that would not have been checked at all prior to the new pavement being put in. So what responsibility has Surrey got under a 278 agreement, which is outside a red line boundary, to actually do those ecology studies? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Townsend. Yes, we would do those assessments because, particularly in sort of bird nesting season, we wouldn't want to be touching sort of hedges and trees. I think I know the road from Facebook, which you're talking about in particular with those trees. So why don't we can have a chat about that. I'm very keen actually that we start planting more trees rather than taking them out. We are looking at new ways and new materials of what we can do around our existing trees to stop the roots ripping up the pavements. It's probably going to be similar to the playground rubberized elements, which they do use abroad, but not in the UK. So we are looking at what we can do there, but I am keen on actually seeing what we can do on a tree planting campaign, not only for air quality issues, which is quite keen, but actually generally the coverage is quite important.
Thank you. Councillor Hyman.
Thank you, Chairman. As you know, over the many years, like a broken record, I've been trying to address the issue of the pedestrianisation of Farnham by Crest Nicholson. At the last meeting, you had said, and this is on page 4 of the minutes, so page 4 of our papers. It's the minutes of the last meeting, and the chairman said she'd ask the area highway managers to seek clarification regarding the town model. I'd like to ask Mr. Furness really whether he has any knowledge of this issue or any involvement. We are told that this is going to commence this summer, so it'll be before our next local committee meeting, Chairman. And as I've been spending about 15 years trying to find someone who will show us the modelling. Well, it's only 10 years. We're trying to find someone who will show us the traffic modelling conducted by Crest Nicholson, supposedly. I mean, I know it wasn't actually done, but someone's got to admit it sooner or later. We're going to have our town centre part pedestrianised with a scheme which is so controversial and with the impacts predicted to be so bad that Crest would not model it, could not model it, and I think it's time that we absolutely insisted, that we have a trial of this before the construction goes ahead. It would be madness to go ahead with something where for 10 years people have avoided showing us what the impacts would be, despite this being an EIA project. It is actually the core of our air quality action plan, which is an obligation under Section 86 of the Environment Act 1995. So this isn't a planning matter, as was mentioned as some people seem to think at the last meeting when I mentioned it. It is something which is very important to Farnham. It could make or break the town, so to speak. And I want to see that modelling before anybody starts doing the construction work, closing and changing the roads. This is about making it two-way round the back of the Woolmead. It's a very controversial plan. We either need to see the modelling or we need it to be trialled. And I know that you've said many times, Chairman, that you would help with this. Nothing's happened. I'm asking, can Councillor Furness please give us an assurance that this is not going to be batted off and we could end up with hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of work that needs to be redone, possibly. Thank you.
Thank you. This is directly tied to the planning application, I presume, isn't it?
It came through a planning application from Crest Nicholson, but it was Surrey County Council and Waverley's plan in the first place that they put into the East Street scheme.
Okay, so the information that you're asking for should be in the planning file held at Waverley Borough Council. No, you shake your head. It should be held there. If
it's a modelling in ceramics. It's computer modelling in ceramics. Mm-hmm. Therefore, there's a program. You can't put it on a piece of paper and put it in a planning file. Yes, it's held on a computer and you play it back over a screen and you watch it a real-time model of the proposals.
I'd have to check on that because actually the ceramics comes out with ones and zeros a lot of the time, the model. So it should be in the report. I will ask about your specific inquiry. This doesn't fall under my remit in highways, because highways is very much what we do on the roads, the construction, the repair and everything else. This one falls with Councillor Kemp, Deputy Leader. He looks after the transport planning in particular. But I will ask the question for you, but the information for that planning application should be in that file. So I would advise that you probably start there, because
10 years I've done everything except nobody will show us actually the output of the modelling. So as I say, you understand ceramics modelling. You can't put it on a piece of paper for me, sir. No way. You put it up on a screen and you press the button and it plays in real time, and nobody will show that. Okay. Crest say they did it. It's never been produced.
Thank you, Mr. Hyman. Mr. Harmer wanted to come in.
Yes, I just wanted to ask Mr. Hyman, actually. The only ceramics thing that I saw in 2002, 2003 was essentially it was road traffic movements. Is that what you're talking about?
We discussed this in 2005 at a meeting, if you remember here, when you were the chairman of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, and the modelling had been put in front of us, and the portfolio holder said, we've seen the ceramics modelling, it's horrendous. That was Surrey's modelling.
No, I'm not criticising. I'm just trying to understand which one you're talking about. Okay, so
that's right.
Model. It was a bit later than I said. You're quite right. So it was post the original contract with Crest Nicholson, and it was looking primarily at South Street, Hickley's Corner, what was going to likely to happen there as a result of what was being proposed.
It was for the town centre, including Hickley's, but mainly it is the Royal Deer Junction and the pedestrianisation issue that was being modelled to look at the...
Well, that's what's confusing me, because pedestrianisation hadn't really become an issue at that stage. That came a bit later on, surely.
No, that was it was part of the scheme that was put forward in 2002 and agreed by Waverley in 2003.
Not on the scale of now, but yes, right. Okay, I think I understand what you're saying about the ceramics model. Yeah, I mean you're right. That is how it worked, and so who goodness knows where it would be, given that, yes.
Well, there should be a model somewhere, even if it's an updated one, that we can be shown. But I don't want to go on about this. I want to just see the model, because it's there and people have told us it exists and we've never been allowed to see it. But that's enough for now. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Hyman. I mean, I think it might be possibly with IT, given what we've heard, but I think we should move on now. Mr. Ramsdale.
Just to say that on a different topic, I had an email passed to me that suggested that Will Bryans has that model. Now, whether it's the exact model that did that task, I don't know, but I can share that with Frank and
Thank you, that would be helpful, because it'd be useful to track this down. It's been a long-running matter. Right. I think, unless anybody else has anything absolutely burning to say, we should call it a day on general highways matters. Matt was kindly going to then also talk to us about rat runs on rural roads. Do you want to say something in general, and then I'll bring the questioners in?
Right, what can I say about rat runs on rural roads? This is increased traffic is becoming a bigger issue generally as we are doing development growing. We are supporting the districts and boroughs as much as possible in their emerging local plans or adopted local plans in making sure that infrastructure is at the heart of that. And at Surrey County Council, we work very closely with the Local Enterprise Partnership, both of them, as well as other bodies such as Homes England, in order to get infrastructure funding. And you may have heard recently that Woking has just recently been awarded 95 million for their town centre, really around infrastructure to deliver homes. So what I would say is the money is there if we're wanting sustainable solutions. It does come with development, but actually a lot of the works that we do are pushing for sustainable transport. With the rat runs, which people do sort of see an increase of, that is because our main routes and connection points are not working as efficiently as they can be. I represent Shalford, as I said. I probably see a lot of the traffic coming up through Cranley and Waverley, which are trying to avoid the 281. I have on occasion used these country roads myself because I know that I can get somewhere in 30 minutes rather than either the 20 to an hour and a half that it takes me to get from Cranley to Guildford. So we do have these issues. So we are seeing what we can do to improve more transport links as well as improving the main roads as well. What I would say though, and I had a chat with Mr. Osborne before, is we do have the wider issue emerging, which we are looking at, which is air quality and the declaration of air quality management areas. These are the responsibility of districts and boroughs currently, but we are working with districts and boroughs to see what we can do, because a lot of the air quality issues are roads, highways, people with their cars. It's less so, I will stress, the HGVs, they make up a proportion, but actually probably 80%, 70 to 80% is all of us using our cars to get from A to B, and that is becoming an issue. Guildford, I think, is actually going to be ringed very soon on the south side with air quality management areas for the traffic coming through, which is why we are looking at what we can do for the traffic going north-south on sustainable, whether it's park and rides, increased train routes. You've just had one from Farnham to Guildford as well. But the other issue that we do have is if we take or ban from a particular rural road, where do we push it to? And that is becoming the big issue. If we take all the rural roads out, we have only got the A roads, and then it's an enforcement issue. Now, we've got a specific one that Mr. Osborne has raised. Did you want to bring him in now, or did you want me to just carry on?
Mr. Osborne, would you like to come in now, perhaps?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm intrigued about the air quality issue because, as you intimated to me, that means that effectively you can't do anything if it increases the number of vehicles using a road that will then have an impact on air quality. So does that mean that once that restriction is in place, effectively you can't allow for Dunsfold Park to be built, or for, had it not had planning permission already, or any new developments, because that would push more traffic onto the roads that the air quality would restrict?
So we cannot make the air quality in an area worse. You cannot approve things. So if, as I say, if we were to take out any of the east-west routes, it would just push them into other east-west routes, which do have air quality management areas. So Godalming, I believe, has one. Compton has one as well, which they're all links to the A3. So we do need to think of other ways that we can actually get transport and vehicles moving around the borough. I take your point on HGVs. No one likes having HGVs around them. We do see an increase in deliveries, which can come from HGVs, which I know is part of the report. But what I was going to suggest with this specific case was that we actually do a destination survey to make sure that people are using it as a rat run, actually have the evidence there, and then we can come up with some solutions, because if they are using this route where there is a better route, that could actually be posted to them. The other option we do have is just to take it out of the HGV sat-navs, which we can actually put to the satellite navigation companies.
That's promising. The sat-navs, they should already have that because it's a road that's unsuitable for HGVs.
Most actually use normal civilian
I appreciate
navs.
that, and once you alert the hauliers, they then wrap the knuckles of the drivers. And I've managed to secure a couple of agreements with companies on a company-wide setting level that they now no longer use that route. So if they're ashamed, they do it, and it fits with their corporate responsibility statements. I'm curious, though, that we're happy to have HGV using C or D roads, even though the A roads are the most appropriate place for them, because the air quality issues are the same when they arrive at Milford, which is the end of the Western Corridor, as they're trying to get to A3. So I'm slightly concerned that we're saying we're quite happy for them to be on C and D roads because we're worried about the air quality on A roads. Well, the A roads are the correct place for HGVs, are they not?
I don't think that's what we're saying. What I'm saying is A roads, yes, are preferable. We would want people to use them. We and the police cannot enforce against absolutely everyone who chooses not to use the preferred route on an A road. That would actually just be impractical on every level. What I am saying is it's a bigger issue than just banning one road or banning one country lane, because it actually does push the issue elsewhere, and you actually need a holistic view of what we can do. There is no silver bullet for this, and we are in a very busy part of the country. So I think there is a degree of acceptance of what we do have to accept, but if it is over and above that, then we can take action. But I have said we will go away, see what we can do with the destination survey. If people are using it as a rat run, we can therefore see what we can do, but I'm not going to promise anything here today.
Sure, I understand, and the destination survey is really good, and I hope that will reinforce what I know from our studies. I'm resigned to the fact that we can't change commuting. That's not within our remit. We can't do that. That's why I'm focused on the HGVs, because that's something they shouldn't be using this road for. And it is a strategic route. It's not just any other rural rat run. You know, HGVs who are not doing local deliveries, and that's the majority of them that I see going past my door, those are the guys that we need to say enforce the sat-navs so that they then stay on the A roads, that's where the strategy was. That's what they should be there. That's why the blue signs are there, because somebody many years ago decided, yes, the A roads is the place. I just need it to be more structured now, and hopefully a destination survey will help. I think that's the least we can expect.
Very happy to do that. So after we spoke, I did get my Google Maps up, and I desperately tried to find a way of getting from here through Markwick Road what destinations would actually pop up. It was actually going south via Milford. That was the only way I could get it to route me that direction. Every other time it took me on the A roads. So it was quite interesting, but we'll have a look and see what the destination survey does come up with, whether it is local traffic that is using it or it is actually strategic hauliers, as you believe.
Well, we have 60 HGVs that emerge at Milford that come that route. Some of them are to the local businesses like Chewsley Farm, but the ones that I've surveyed are coming from Dunsfold, from Cranley and from Horsham, and they're not local deliveries. So they're aiming for the A3 because that's the gateway to the Midget Valley, to Basingstoke, to Farnborough, and then up the A3 to London. And if you Google from Dunsfold or from Cranley, it will take you via Milford during peak times, not via Guildford.
Okay, I think Liz has a question as well.
Right, Mrs. Townsend next, please.
Thank you. just to about rat runs in general, you know, we also have an issue in Cranley as well, which is then Bar Hatch Lane going up Hound House Road and then on to Sandy Lane into Sheer and out that way. And I know a couple of years ago when I first started on this committee, there was an HGV study being done across the Surrey Hills, and it kind of came to, I think, a halt because of some issues with other villages like Gomshall, Chilworth, not wanting more traffic being pushed onto them. So I just wondered that the problem is, and I frequent the Surrey Hills every single day on my dog walk, is that the roads are becoming very, very badly eroded on the side. The sides of the roads are becoming very eroded. The amount of traffic using them now is obviously much more. And as it is an area of outstanding natural beauty, and there are an awful lot of trees which are being damaged as well as large vehicles go through, which causes, problems for obstructions across the road as well. So what has happened to that HGV study that was being done, and also what is being done generally to look at the problem with these rat runs and to try and prevent too many, especially the larger vehicles, from using these roads? Thank you.
So with the study, I believe it is still being done. The issue, as I mentioned earlier... Sorry? Well, yeah, Mole Valley was one part of it. It was, as you said, people are not wanting it shifted onto them. So that's kind of why it's halted to a degree, while we try and think, actually, what can we do? As I said earlier, we can't force people to pick a particular route. We will have signs all over the place, and I think the police would be working overtime just enforcing against people who ignore them. So we need to think a bit more pragmatically about what we do. Do we accept that there is a degree, or do we find sort of a better way of routing them around the county? It's not an easy solution, I'm afraid, this one.
Thank you. I've now got Mr. Martin.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, this is a huge issue, and I know the roads to which Mr. Osborne is referring. It runs through Station Road, Milford, for instance, is a part of my division. I would love to reduce the traffic there. What happens then, it tends to go down the Brighton Road towards Godalming and then cuts through Busbridge Holloway and down Shackstead Lane, which is an even worse place for traffic to go. So the big problem is displacement, and that's what you've already referred to. We must do nothing if it's simply going to be passed and worsen another area. I think that's a huge issue. My own pet solution, which I've been pushing for years and haven't got very far, is a vastly improved A281. If we had a vastly improved A281 bypassing Bramley, going up to Burpham and joining the A3 at that point, it would be a dramatic change and take all the traffic out of Cranley and do everything that we need to do. The cost of that is huge, and the difficulty is we don't have the funding for it. And even the significant developments that we're seeing at Dunsfold and Cranley would not produce enough money to fund such a thing. And that itself would be difficult because you'd be driving a new road through all sorts of sensitive areas, and it would be hugely difficult. The difficulty we have, you refer to the Woking scheme, which is fine to produce more homes. The difficulty for most of us is that we've had tens of thousands of new homes over the last 30 years in this area without any accompanying significant infrastructure development. So there's a deficit that we need to put right. The government never take account of that, and that's a huge issue that we need to work on. We need more funding from government for this area, without a question. Thank you.
Okay. So I'll pick the funding one first, if I may. The funding is there. The government is actually throwing money at councils at the moment if it is for the delivery of homes. And if you're wanting to speed up the delivery rate, you can actually get the funding for that. And I suggest if Waverley Borough Council is serious on actually wanting some sustainable transport solutions and improvements, they need to start drawing up the ideas and putting it together. It's what we did in Guildford when I was on there. We got a huge amount of funding directly from the government. We got new bridges over railways funded. You can do it. It does take work, but actually Waverley Borough Council needs to have that bit of drive to do this. I can't say I'm going to agree with you on sort of ploughing through the Surrey Hills with a new bypass, but that is one option that, as was mentioned earlier with Councillor Kemp on the question of whether we could link up faster with the A3. It would stop a lot of the unsuitable roads being used. These are never popular, though, putting a new road in. I think everyone will be in full support until they see the route, and then they'll be dead against it. So that is a challenge. But if Waverley Borough Council wants to come up with an idea, we will work very closely from Surrey with them to do that. At the moment, Surrey County Council doesn't have the ability to fund it. I think the highways budget is one of the smallest out of all the other budgets at the county. So I do have to use the limited resources on making sure that the roads continue to be in a usable state. I won't say perfect, a usable state, and that we can actually still get people moving around the county.
Thank you. Mr. Martin, do you want to come back? Or?
No, I just wanted to say I accept entirely, but the extra money is linked to new homes. The point that I was making is that we have a huge deficit where we've had tens of thousands of homes over the last 30 years with almost nothing to go with it.
Yeah, here. Mr. Gray.
Thank you, Chairman. I really would like to just support Mr. Osborne's comments on Margaret Lane. I think that the foretaste of what we've got at the moment is being fuelled by the housing building in Cranley. If you look at the number of vans and going up in there, it's increased phenomenally, as well as the HGV traffic. But HGV traffic is causing problems all over. If you go down Hascombe, the number of times you find a lorry and a van can't overtake, and you're talking about then backing up traffic in there. It's happening all the time. It is getting worse. And this is before we've got this wonderful garden village coming in Dunsfold with all the impact on that. We're getting it at the construction stage, so we're getting the early increase in traffic. We really do have to do something, and there was a question early on about an improved east-west route. Waverley has a real problem with the east-west route. It has a problem certainly on the east, and I think Councillor Martin made the very pertinent comment of the deficit, but the onus to me is on this council, on Waverley Council and on Surrey to do something about that deficit. Councillor Furness, you talk about if Waverley has a will. Well, I think this is a joint issue, not just one of passing it over to Waverley. We've got to solve this problem. The county basically gave Dunsfold Park a clean bill of health from a road traffic point of view. A lot of us had great concerns over that. This is a problem we've inherited. This is a problem that people are going to pay for. Waverley in total is going to pay for it, but other places are going to pay for it as well. This is a really big issue, and I think that certainly a lot of my residents don't feel there is enough will collectively to find a solution to it.
So, Councillor, what I would say is there is a will. Surrey is very keen on working in partnership, and we are actively doing it with most districts and boroughs, to be fair. Everyone has said here today, this is an issue. What are you going to do about it? Well, can I put it to everyone here? What would you like to be done apart from pushing the issue onto another area? At the end of the day, there is no monopoly on good ideas. I'd love to hear some ideas, but at the moment, when this is raised, I get a lot of fist banging on tables and saying, sort it out. But please, if there is a solution that you all know of and I don't, I'm happy to listen, take it away, and get the teams to work on it.
Mr. Gray, would you want to come back?
Thank you, thank you. I understand your point, and I understand the cleverness of actually deflecting this. It is one that I own as well. I'm not just saying it's this. Yes, we've had lovely suggestions. What about dual carriageway down Margaret Lane? I mean, we need a route. We need a road. People have looked at trains, introducing train stations. This is something that is really concerning because it's not going to get better. There is no easy solution. And I think we need to have some serious forum to try and get this. I don't know whether the garden village status of Dunsfold will attract to it, but I've heard in the past that people were looking at LEP money and government money. I'm just frustrated that this isn't actually coming. And if there is something that Waverley should be doing, Councillor Furness, please tell us. I'll tell me and I will tell Waverley.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, if Waverley, so I'll take, from my experience in Guildford, I'll take that when I was on the Borough Council in Guildford. We came up with, well, pretty much all the schemes that were being put forward. There's 62 interventions across the whole borough. We worked with Surrey County Council, and Surrey gave us the information, the expertise and everything else, but it was the borough that was driving it through the local plan. That's what got the funding, because it was tied to the delivery of homes. Now, if Waverley would like to do or fund, let's say fund to start with, some of the work, Surrey would be very happy to assist. And we can start looking at that. Our issue at the moment, sorry, is we don't quite have enough revenue funding in order to do that. And that's the capacity issue that we have. There is the money available. We are successful. We do joint bids. So the Woking one, for example, was submitted on behalf of Surrey County Council because it was such a large bid. I'm very happy to work with everyone on this one. I know it is an issue, but it has been an issue for a number of years. No one has come up with a solution. Everyone says a bypass or a dual carriageway on one of the existing or a new road. At the end of the day, we'll just be pushing that traffic to the A3 much faster, and then that becomes the next issue for Highways England. So we need to work with all our partners.
Thank you. I don't know. I've got Councillor Baker next.
Thank you. Well, I'm speechless. Isn't this all a bit too late? We have major problems on the highways actually arising predictably from the Dunsfold development, and we have no contributions that are meaningful for the whole area, a comprehensive solution from the Dunsfold developers. I looked at the time the consent was given, and there was a roundabout on the 281 and a road into the airfield area. And I think that that was just about all that the developer was going to be asked to pay for. So I am very pleased to support Mr. Osborne. I drive the road, the whole of that road between Milford and the 281 very regularly. It's in an appalling state of repair anyway, and yet we're proposing to have more traffic on it. I hear you say that there is no solution. There are supposed to be mitigating measures, and I see that that includes buses. If you try putting buses on Markwick Lane, you are going to come very unstuck very quickly. So I really find myself at a loss to know what we can do about this, but we certainly need to do something. And rather than have a feasibility study into a new road, which would take up beautiful countryside, and this Dunsfold is supposed to be a sustainable development. I don't see much that's sustainable about the consequences for the surrounding area. So I think I'd like to propose that we have a joint working party to look at the whole problem. I think Mr. Furness, Councillor Furness, has explained to us just how difficult it is going to be to cope with this. I think the only thing is if we get together and talk about it. Because otherwise, I take the displacement point very seriously. And while I personally would love something to be done about Station Lane, Markwick Lane route, I can see what will happen. So I wonder if we could have a working group instead of a feasibility study. I'd like to propose that. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Well, I'm happy to put that on the agenda, put something along those lines on the agenda for the next private meeting to see if that is something we wish to take forward, and if we do, what exactly its parameters would be and how would be best to deal with it. Mr. Osborne, I'm not going to come to you yet. Mr. Spence wanted to...
Thank you, and I think that will be a good thing to talk through at a private meeting, because, you know, the system is broke and everybody is doing their best. But in the 2 years that I've been doing this, you know, Frank's doing his best, Adrian's doing his best, Colin did, Jeremy Hunt does. But you know what? It doesn't get fixed. There's simple things. Ban trucks over 7.5 tonnes on the Upper Hill Road in Farnham. Now, the answer is no. Ban trucks coming down Castle Street. The answer is no. And the very lengthy answers, and some of it even makes sense. So you get the Foreign Secretary involved with us, Wyatt, me and Andy, in a conversation about how we can get the centre of Farnham traffic fixed. The first phase, about 2 to 5 million. We've actually broken it into 4 phases to deal with all the stuff that's been sitting there for 60 years that hasn't been done. And the Foreign Secretary of this country has to go around with a begging bowl to try and get the money to do this. And we haven't got it. We haven't even got it for the first phase. I was very optimistic that we were getting there, but then Frank reported to me in the last meeting when they then added in the mitigation had to be done in Hickley's Corner and other parts of Farnham. You know, the money starts going out, you know, 15 million, 20 million, 50 million. Now, you know, I know Chris Graylin's got a bypass fund. There's 1 billion in there. The LAP's got money. There's money in there. You know, the money's all over the place. There's no coordination of it. Colin was very helpful in getting a proposal that a project manager would be put forward by Surrey to try and do something about the Farnham Town Centre, including a traffic survey on the Upper Hill Road, because anything you do to the centre impacts there, blah, 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 blah. I imagine every single town in the county can repeat the story they're going through. So far, I've put a whole lot of work in with a whole lot of really good people. For 2 years, I've achieved absolutely nothing. Nothing has changed. And I know it's a very busy part of the country. I know there's lots of cars. I know there's lots of trucks. But we can't just get to the point where even George has to keep coming up and saying, do you have to keep slapping down the tarmac instead of putting proper York stone down? You know, this is not how we want to live. And it is a very, very difficult, huge, big, interconnected problem. And I do think we're going to have to find some macro way of cracking this, because we are not cracking it in me and my small corner and you and yours, because everyone you come across has got good intent, is trying to do their best, and is absolutely gridlocked, just like the traffic.
Okay, sorry, I'm not sure there was a question in there, but I'm a practical person, very pragmatic, a little bit too blunt at times because I will say no or give my view. But we are seeing what we can do, pulling together the expertise that we do have within the county to actually tackle some of these issues. But we do require the boroughs and districts to work with us on that. And it does help when the boroughs and districts have an idea of what they would like to achieve, particularly on what the alternatives are. Dunsfold's been mentioned time and time again, but never, I'm going to go to Liz's area now, never is the 1500 in Cranley, which were in sort of smaller sites, nothing was asked for on those from the borough. The Dunsfold one, the contribution's going in the Guildford area because Guildford Borough Council asked for that contribution to mitigate against the traffic that would be coming up to Guildford. So we have to work together on these points, and I think actually having those conversations is very good. With the development, there will be the money, but you have to ask, you have to have the evidence base in which to do it. We will happily support on that one, Colin and myself, but we do need to think of some alternatives for sustainable transport as well. We are privileged to live in such a nice area of the country, but it is also quite a wealthy area of the country, and people do like their cars. I'm one of them, but I do take public transport where I can. I seem to have riled everyone up with that, because everyone's hands went up, but there we go.
Right, I think we haven't got unlimited time. I will let...
Sorry,
I think Mr. Jeffrey, would you like a chance to say anything? Because you haven't had your supplementary question to your question. Sorry. Would you like to ask us sort of a further question to your original question? Would you like to say something else now, or have you heard enough?
Well, I'd just like to microphone. Sorry. Yes, forgotten that. I set out in some detail what I see the problems. When I say I see the problems, I see them every week. I see litter. I see cars speeding past our doors at rates which are dangerous.
all these are details and they can be dealt with, provided they are recognised as being really an abuse of the wonderful countryside in which we live and which is protected by being an AONB, to which no attention has been paid whatsoever. And I think it needs a great deal of determination to get this right. It can be got much better. As a rather pleasanter point, I have found that a lot of the drivers on these roads are very respectful and try and help. Some don't, and it's the bigger vehicles which are the bigger culprits. But if you appeal to the public, the using public, to when they are using these roads, to behave themselves in some form or another, I think you will get a marked improvement. And so you've got to have the willpower to get it right. We can't abolish this east-west corridor, but we can greatly improve it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jeffreys. I know Mr. Gray, Mrs. Townsend wanted to come back, and Councillor Clark, Mrs. Coburn. Mrs. Coburn, you haven't spoken. Just be very brief, please.
I was waiting to the end because it's strictly not quite on rat runs, but it's something that Councillor Furness said about sustainable transport. Because you have to be careful what you wish for. Yes, you mentioned the extra train to Guildford, wonderful, except that we have a level crossing with an air quality issue either side of it, and whereas it was shut for about 20 minutes every hour, it's now going to be shut for even longer. So, you know, when we're looking at this, I hate the word holistic, but I can never think of a better one, comprehensively, we really have to look at that because, you know, one man's sustainable transport is another man's nightmare.
I would totally agree with you on that specific case, which is why I raised it with Chris Grayling at my regular meeting with him, and I'm going to be doing so with the network operators as well on the rail, because it's actually down to the rail companies and their engagement and what they should take on as a responsibility. Because it's, again, they've had an impact on the road network, which causes another issue. It's how we can get that changed in the future. I do take your point. Level crossings are the bane of my life, pretty much, more so the rural rat runs, just because of the issues that they cause. But we are aware of that, and we're trying to address that so it doesn't happen again in the future. Because as we are trying to put more trains on the lines, more frequent ones, it will have a knock-on impact. It's how we mitigate that.
Right, the last word to Mrs. Barton, and then I think we should move on.
Thank you. I'd just really like to call for some kind of strategic plan going forwards for the whole area. I'm really worried that we're just reacting constantly rather than being proactive. We know we're getting housing. We know the challenges we face. We know we need to have a more of a sustainable strategy as well. But it seems to me it's piecemeal. It's bits and pieces all over the borough that then links with other counties. And I think we really need to press for, I don't know whether it's a joint working group or whatever it is, but I mean, do you have a plan, Councillor Furness, for a strategic vision for Waverley and the context of the county? Thank you.
So we are very much straying into my colleague Colin Kemp's area now. But yes, if you look at the Surrey infrastructure plan, that does have pretty much everything from across the county. I have politely suggested 3 or 4 times during this debate that what would Waverley Borough Council and its residents like? I'm not going to do a top-down Surrey County Council, we're telling you what to do. I think we need to hear what you would like and what sort of solutions you would like for between your very different interconnecting settlements, because it's not going to be a one-size-fits-all. I do know that there are boroughs on the boundaries, Guildford, Rushmore and so on, who are very keen to join up the cycling networks, particularly around Farnham. But there is a little bit of resistance on this side of the border, I have found. So we need to find out, what do you all want? Because I'm not going to do you will do this, but if it continues possibly in a few more years' time, you may find that some of us will start saying, right, you've had your chance, we're going to start moving in and saying, this is what we need to do, rather than what you would like to do.
Right, two quick words from Mrs Townsend and Mrs Clark. Mrs Clark. Mr Baker, I'm so sorry. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Could I thank Councillor Furness for tipping us off about making sure Waverley asks for what is there in the pot? And could I say Waverley now has a different administration?
I won't comment on that. I'll wait and see what happens.
Mrs Townsend.
Thank you. Just quickly, Matt, very much welcome the idea of joint working and that. One of the things, though, that I just would like to take a slight issue with is the fact that within our local plan, obviously the Dunsfold settlement is 2,600, and the mitigation for that, which highways were involved in looking at, obviously, and commented on, was nothing to do with needing an extra road or dual carriageway, small infrastructure improvements on a crossroads, the Nanhurst crossroads, obviously a slightly bigger problem at Shalford, really minuscule things going through Bramley. So I do take slight issue with how can we push things through when Surrey Highways are actually saying, well, this is the problem and this is the mitigation. So it is a bit sort of shutting the stable door after the horse has bolted slightly here now. Highways should have been perhaps more looking more strategically when they knew that there were going to be 1,700 houses in Cranley, minimum of 2,600 in Dunsfold, which are only a mile apart, just over a mile apart. So surely we have to rely on what we call the experts within Surrey Highways to lead us as well.
I wouldn't disagree. And on the previous comment, there are new people in these roles. So Councillor Kemp runs the TDP team. They report to him. That's the Transport Development team. Although it always says Surrey Highways, it's actually that team in the planning side of Surrey that does it. It's not my teams, I'm afraid. My teams are the ones actually going out and fixing your roads. We are aware. We are looking at what we can do to change that in the future. We are also aware we are really doing a cultural change as well on asking for money. Because for some reason in local government, after quite a few years, we're always afraid to ask for money. And if you don't ask, you don't get. And now we have to do that asking. So whilst Ms Spence said the begging bowls are out, they definitely are out at the moment, saying, actually, no, you're not going to get permission unless you deliver X, Y, and Z. But it does help if there are any local ideas of what could be done for them to investigate at the same time. Because at the end of the day, if you're wanting a particular link into Cranley, let us know, because otherwise the team will just say, oh, we know the issues are going to be there, there and there, therefore we'll ask for that, that and that. They won't ask for what you're wanting to do locally unless they know. So that's why I'm really sort of pushing, tell us what actually you're wanting to do locally and we'll see what we can do to help.
Thank you, Matt, very much. I mean, I'd just like to, it's been useful information to hear. I would just like to reiterate that I think many of us are frustrated the way that, I know transport development planning isn't really your area, but that they say, oh, well, this development's only 200 houses. We look at 200 houses on its own, not in the context of 200 and another 400 and another 200, yes. And the cumulative effect. And I think that is really where, and I know that that is the law, but I think that that is something we need perhaps to look at.
On cumulative effect, what I would say is I've actually, as a county councillor, had a couple of ones refused in my division on the cumulative effect. And they have actually had to put forward separate mitigation then to demonstrate and do it. So I'd say it is done. The transport team do it. So you can, if you've got the evidence to go to them and what you want to get out of it, you can do it. But I'm afraid there's going to be a little bit more work for the elected members as well.
Right. Oh, sorry, Mr. Harmer. I'm so sorry.
I just wanted to say, Chairman, that you have to think quite carefully how you do these things, but they can be done. I used to represent Waverley, I used to represent on Waverley, Hindhead. And when I got elected, we discovered, Peter Isherwood and myself, that 65 years previously, they'd started campaigning for a bypass. So we started again from scratch, and we worked out what we needed to do in order to get the support of the right people in the right places at the right time. Now, I have to confess, you need to make sure that you ask carefully for what you want, because what then happened was that the government chose to spend £300 million more than we intended. We wanted to go over the top. We had a French attitude. We wanted to see those views from over the top of the hill as it would have been. And it would have cost £300 million less, which would probably have solved most of your problems. But really, if you You need to know exactly what it is that you're seeking to achieve and then get the right people to agree with you. Please try it. Mr. Furness is keen to do that. I'm confident that Colin will support that as well. But you do need to agree amongst yourselves exactly what it is you want to do.
Right. Thank you. Briefly, please.
Just to say that in Farnham, we have done it. Working together, Andy MacLeod, Stephen Spence, who's nodding in agreement, and myself, different political views of origin, and with the borough councillors, some of us were also borough councillors, and with members of the town council, not least Carol Coburn, who was then leader, came together and came up with our views of what we wanted. And it's now been taken on board to try and create a Farnham strategic plan. And my wish has been for an A325 bypass. And would you believe we're now looking and identifying potential developments that could count for our numbers to get it. So what I would say to you is all, go ask these people because they will help. And we've been getting help, albeit I haven't got much product from it yet.
Right, thank you. And that really is it on that. So we're now going to move to item 9, the ordinary, in inverted commas, highway update. Hand over to Frank.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, it's quite a benign report. There's only one recommendation or one approval, which is for the bus stop on Petworth Road, which is on page 21 and 22 of the agenda. Otherwise, yeah, I'm open to questions. Thank you.
Mrs. Baker.
Thank you. With regard to the bus stop on the Petworth Road, I've actually lived in the area since 1974, and I remember that the postmaster at Whitley Post Office, which is Wormley Post Office, which is the bus stop is right outside, said that that lay-by was never constructed for the use of buses. The unfortunate thing is, I can't remember what he said it had been intended for when it was first constructed. So that's not a very positive observation from me. But I do regularly see cars parked in that lay-by, and I can understand that if the timing is wrong, I don't know what they're doing there. I can't think. Maybe pulling off to use their phones, but since if the timing is wrong, I think it's probably a matter of safety to actually mark it as a bus lay-by. So I would support that.
Do you want to say anything on that, Frank? No? Right, Mrs. Coburn.
Yes, apologies, Chairman, if I've raised this before, but it's always troubled me. In the 106 agreement with Chris Nicholson, that you hope, the agreement is you haven't got the money yet, basically. It was agreed in 2008, when it was drawn up, and he's got this park and stride. And to my dying day, I will never understand for 1 minute why we need one. I didn't at the time, and I raised all this at the time, and I just wondered if, given the amount of money and given the fact that the development is now actually sort of started, whether there's any chance they can just revisit to make sure that the money that is being held, according to the 106 agreement that was signed in 2008, is actually best use of the money available, because, we park and stride now. We don't need to have a whole load of money paid on. And it was a Vic Scriven special. I mean, those of us who lived through that era will remember some of the quirky things that he wanted to put into the scheme. And this was one that arrived. But I just think it's a total waste of money. Or put it this way, I think there's much better use of that amount of money. So I just wondered if any discussions could be had, or whether it's set in stone, or where we go. But seems a waste to me.
Yes, I have had a meeting only last week or the week before with Richard Homewood at the at Waverley. We are looking at other opportunities to spend that money. I believe it's about £275,000. primarily because, as you know, the whole of Farnham is up for change. There could be changes to the way that traffic is routed through the town centre. There could be areas that are going to be pedestrianised. It would not be advantageous at this stage to introduce any of that money that could be abortive. So what we're looking at is the potential for looking at car parks. Are they in the right places? Looking at VMS signs, advising drivers entering the town what bays are available where and how many. So looking at it more holistically, using that word that we were using earlier on, to try and come up with a better use of that money in Farnham, to hopefully fit in with the other schemes that are also everyone else is looking at trying to achieve in the town centre.
Thank you. Next on my list, I've got Mr. Spence.
Thank you, Chair. Just two small things. In relation to the list of councillors and their money, I did dutifully go along and have the conversation about how Frank could spend my money, and I did agree to hand it all over in relation to the 7,500. That's simply not reflected in the overall total committed column, because there's a 0 against me, whereas everybody else has got the 7,500 listed. So I just wanted to point that out, lest it was thought I was...
What page? Page 27.
It's on page 27, item 9, page 27. The far right-hand column says 0.
Noted. We'll take you off the naughty list.
Yes, thank you. I did not withhold my consent. The other item is on page 35. It's just the list of the transport monies on section 106. I raised this at the last committee and I'll raise it again. I did subsequently contact Richard Cooper again about the Folly Hill development and the 50,000 I want out of that, even though I don't want the development, because I want Upper Hale Road to have a traffic island. It is on the list, but it's not on the written list. It wasn't on the written list at the last local committee. It's not on the written list now, and even though I've got emails that say I'm getting it, I want it on the list, because if it's on the list, it's more certain I will get it. And my last comment is I do enjoy these conversations because you eventually on the micro issues get somewhere. And I think if you give Frank and Colin Kemp unlimited plenipotentiary powers on highways, it would be a lot better and we get a lot further down the road quicker.
Thank you. Will you note the business about the Section 106 money that...
Yes, I think you've had an email from Richard confirming that that money is available, but it's only collected once they have built 50% of the houses. And yes, you unfortunately were one of the very last to attend the meetings, and the agendas had to be in before that date. So unfortunately you did have a 0, but yes, now we do have some allocation. So in the next one, there will be some numbers against your name. Thank you.
Mr. Cossa next, please.
Sorry, these are genuine questions, perhaps just me having to catch up and understand what's going on now. So far as the, what's it called now, the Revenue Highways Fund is concerned, can I just clarify the issue about vegetation? It says in the report that of the 7.5 million for each county council, 5 million, 5 million. Yeah, sorry, I go back a long way. And there were occasions. No, sorry. The 1,000, yeah. The 5,000 of that has been allocated to a vegetation gang. What I want, I know the pressures on that. I remember them very, very well. But as a Godalming town councillor, I sort of gained the impression somewhere down the line that our two local county councillors have made some of their or all of their money available for the town council to actually spend. And I'm pretty certain that actually, for all sorts of reasons, it can be spent more effectively the more local you spend. And particularly as the town council now has just decided that it will appoint 2 operatives who will do a whole range of work around the town. I just need to clarify if that £5 million, I'm sorry, the £5,000, I'm only doing it for your amusement, of course, and historical effect, but the £5,000 is actually going to some sort of central vegetation gang, or whether we are using it more locally. And I don't quite understand what's happening with the other £2,500. Is that just at the discretion of the councillors? That's my first question. My second one, if I might just introduce it, is that back in the day, and I guess to be fair, it was when we actually had more money to spend, as the local county councillor, Councillor Martin and I used to have a small group at which we had reps from the town council and the borough council to talk about what priorities should be, and so there was a wider input into how the money was spent. I can sort of perhaps understand, as there's so apparently little money now, it might not be worth doing, but that group seems to have disappeared. Can somebody clarify for me what the thinking is around that, please? Thank you.
Yes, the 7,500 rather million is for each divisional member. It's been allocated. There's 81 members. They all have this year £7,500 each. Because there is no revenue allocation this financial year, it was advantageous to ask each member to give me some of their allocation. So I asked for 5,000 to try and replicate what we'd done in other years, which was to attempt to carry out either the localism element or cutting back of vegetation. And I think each of the 3 members in that particular area of Godalming have all given me all of their 7.5 rather than just the 5. So both Councillor Martin, Rivers, that's it, yes, have given me their allocations for that area. So what we are doing is working very closely with the clerk, Andy Jeffries, to utilise his expertise and his guys to try and get best value wherever we can with the gangs working in that area, and also to provide us with locations that are felt to be the most needy.
Okay.
Now that we have formally established, and we'll actually have in place sometime, obviously later this year, the very small DLO group, could I just ask whether there might be some possibility in having discussions about whether we could employ the money even more effectively if it were devolved somewhat further? I'm not asking for commitments today, just that discussion takes place, because I think there could be some advantage.
That would be very much up to the divisional member. It is their money at the end of the day.
Mr. Hyman.
Okay, just a couple of small points, but I'll run through them in numerical order. On page 18, community infrastructure levy, a couple of inches down from the top of page 18. I understand that there is some element of concern amongst in Surrey Highways, because obviously it's collected by Waverley, and it's Surrey who do ultimately need that money in order to be able to put in place the highways infrastructure. Are you satisfied that we have, is Surrey County Council Highways satisfied that we have a system in place that will ensure that you do get usable money, or is there other things that you would ask Waverley and our planning team and our new administration to ensure is in place so that it works well for you? I just want to make sure that that we are aware of what concerns you have on that issue. We also obviously, I know that there was work on updating the infrastructure delivery plan for which goes alongside our local plans. So that's part of the Surrey infrastructure plan, isn't it? It's a subset of it. Is that available? Because I haven't seen it, and if it is, can it please be sent to all members. So that's a second question. Is there an updated or latest version of the infrastructure delivery plan so that all members here can be aware of what is and what isn't on the in the plan for the next 13 years? On page 19 at 243, we talk about the grit bins. Very impressed that this last winter, I used some grit because we did have a little bit of snow, and it was refilled immediately, or almost immediately. Excellent service from Surrey, and just want to thank them for that. Just below that, on street lighting, Chairman, it says that there's a trial of LED lighting in Kingfisher Drive, Merrow. I don't know has that been installed or not, because Councillor Furness told us that we are going ahead with LED lighting. It's almost as though we've gone past this stage now I live in Alfred Road, which is one of those, in Farnham, which is one of those roads which goes dark at midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning, whatever. I just wonder whether it's whether we're going to be putting lights back on again in those places. I know we had to in Sandy Hill and a few others, where it's dark, if we're going to have cheaper, obviously lower energy costs by using LED. So do we intend to go back to the places where we turn the lights off and turn them back on again in the middle of the night, just because we can do it cheaply with LEDs? In page 21, there's a pie chart-ish sort of thing, which Surrey produced in respect of the level crossing downtimes. Just to mention, that doesn't accurately reflect the actual timings that of the way the trains come and go and the way the downtimes are. I did a more accurate one, which I sent through some weeks ago when we had when this problem was arising. I can circulate that if you wish, which shows where where the downtimes actually are at the moment. If people are going to query whether that's accurate, it isn't. And simply amongst the issues that have already been raised, and Councillor Coburn mentioned the Section 106 agreement for Crest Nicholson's East Street scheme. The Park and Stride scheme, my thoughts on Park and Stride are, well, it's only going to work if you gridlock the town completely, and it's faster to walk than to drive to the car park you want to go to, which isn't exactly the best way to bring people into a town, so it's going faster to walk. There was originally in the Section 106 agreement a requirement that we had £25,000 to be paid to Surrey to look at Park and Stride, and that had to be done in advance of commencement. And I wondered, has that money ever been paid? Has that study ever been done? Have they got away with it, or where has that money just disappeared, or is it going to turn up later? Are we actually receiving this money? Because on these papers, it's a lot of them I've circled, where it says due on commencement, and I know these things have commenced. I'm just wondering, do we get this money or not?
If I can take those in reverse order. The 25,000 sits with Waverley. It is available. It forms part of that £275,000 that I mentioned earlier. We are looking at other opportunities for that £25,000 in the short term, and meetings are to be had shortly with Waverley on how we're going to accomplish that, and there is also a representative from Farnham there as well, from the Town Council. The other question regarding the pie chart, that was provided to me directly by South West Trains, and that is the average of their barrier times, and I merely use that to show that the times are going up from 15 minutes in every hour to 30 minutes in every hour, so it's doubling. That wasn't how they led us to believe it was going to happen in the first instance, and that's why I provided that information, and also provided it ahead of this meeting. The LEDs in Guildford, the intention of that was just to show residents the colour and intensity, because there is a slightly different colour and intensity of lighting, and it was merely to have that trial area where people could have a look at what the difference actually was, or the lack of difference, if you like, because of the saving in money. It's not really reflected in the savings of the intensity or the colour. And I think the last one was the
Chairman, can I just ask, did we have some sort of study that said people found it to be okay, or was an executive decision made? I mean, they are fine, are they? The idea of the Merrow study was to work out whether or not it was going to be acceptable. Who decided at the end that it was or wasn't?
It has been extended past wider than the initial bit just in the report there. No comments. No one's noticed. So I would say that was a win.
And the sill issue, it's very early days for Waverley at this stage. I doubt very much if anything has been collected, or if it has, it's very little. As you know, there are two pots. There'll be the local pot, the 25%, the local pot that will be given to parish councils and resident associations, etc. There will still remain the larger strategic pot, which is the one that will require bidding for. And it was going back to the question that Mrs. Ames raised earlier on. It was my understanding that that was why, or one of the reasons why, this committee was looking to become a joint committee so that they could make decisions on that strategic pot going forward.
And the infrastructure delivery plan, do we have an updated version, and is it available to be sent out?
There probably is, but I haven't seen it.
Right, thank you. Mrs. Townsend.
Thank you. Regarding the report, I've got three sort of main questions. The Waverley LTP schemes ranking. Can I just ask Frank, can we perhaps review the ranking of some of the schemes at all, and whether or not it is possible to get you can get other schemes on there at all? And also, could we please, I did ask for it before, correct the spelling of Cranley, Shamley Green and Elbridge Road, please. Cranley's always spelt wrong on this list. So can we review the priority at all, or is that set in stone? And also, can I get more other things on? That's only one of my questions so far, then I'll have 2 and 3, please.
Would you believe we did review this only within the last 6 months?
No, it was last August.
Last summer, was it?
Yeah.
But yes, it was reviewed, and I had a meeting with members. I invited members to a special meeting whereby we could look at this, and because as you'll see, the list is far smaller than it was. It was an enormous list, probably valued at over £2.5 million, if I remember rightly. We've tried to make it something more manageable and something more meaningful. A lot of the schemes that had been there for a long time and weren't going anywhere have been removed, and some other projects have been introduced that members would like to have seen constructed, and it has all been reprioritised. So this is the latest list that was re-ranked and re-looked at last summer.
So does that mean if it was done last summer, it won't be done again for how long?
Mr. Townsend, I mean, it was done and it was ranked by a sort of objective measure that the highways team use and is used across the county.
Okay, I can speak to Frank about that offline. The other thing is then moving on to the allocation, the members' allocation. Can I just say, you know, recently we've had a long conversation about a particular roundabout in Cranley, and which was handed over from the developer to Surrey Highways for maintenance, when it was in an extremely poor state, and now I'm being advised that the money to bring it up to a reasonable state will have to come out of that allocation, and I do object vociferously against that. It was handed over from Surrey. They should have tested it, not your department, I know, Frank, but they should have looked at it and checked that it was in a reasonable state before it was taken over from the developer. We shouldn't be now picking up that funding from our members' allocation of that 5,000 to try and fix it. And I did send you a video of it with commentary, and it is in a terrible state and nothing's been done. So I really hope that that will not come out of there, and some kind of looking at when stuff is taken over from developers to make sure that it is in a reasonable state, and that your team have an opportunity to inspect it before it's signed off. I would ask for that, please. And then finally, on the Section 106 options, I always find the Section 106 a bit like the dark arts in Harry Potter, to be honest, because I can never, ever, ever get to the bottom of where the money actually is. Can I please ask for a column for a timeline on it? It's no help to me if there is money. Surely there's a notional timeline of when this money can actually be used, perhaps. Also, we've spoken recently, we've got together and chatted about improvements in the high street of approximately £100,000 for a particular project. Now, is that money in here? Is it somewhere else? Is that within Waverley, within somewhere else? Okay, thank you for nodding your head at me there, Frank. I know who to chase now on that. But the other thing is this money is in there. We seem to have a phenomenal amount of money for the upgrading of the Downs Link. I mean, it seems to be able to, we can do it like 2 or 3 times perhaps. There seems to be no kind of plan that I can see of which sections we are looking at and when it will be done. We've got some development. When is the stuff going to actually be carried out?
When the committee asked for these, asked me to provide these lists late last year, it was to have a better understanding of how much 106 monies this committee actually had. So this information that I've provided has all come directly from Transportation Development Planning. They hold the money, or not all of the money, but the money that has been passed over from Waverley is held by Transportation Development Planning. The other monies that are shown here where the agreement is either partially signed or on its way, etc., and some of that money may well be held by Waverley. So these lists that he has provided are purely to show the amount of monies that are available or likely to be available and what they were collected for. So some of them are at different stages, whether or not some of them are at a point where we're actually able to use them, and those monies, similar to the PIC monies, are shown separately. So in essence, these are merely lists of values that is either held with us or is going to be held by Surrey. As you well know, the Section 106s are different to the PIC and the SIL in as much as an agreement agrees for how that money is to be used. So we can't really deflect from using that money in the way it was intended. Otherwise, we need to give that money back to the developer or renegotiate that with them.
I understand that completely, Frank, but you know what problem we've had in Cranley, in that the money was costed several years ago. By the time the actual money comes through and you then get to do the project, the money is not enough to do the original projects. If this money sits for too long, none of these projects will, the cost of the projects would have increased. So we end up not being able to deliver what we've actually stated, and it is a ridiculous place to be. So we've got pots of money sitting there which can no longer be used. So we need to be able to accelerate the usage of this money and to deliver these projects, because the longer the time the money sits within anywhere in a pot, the more expensive the project is becoming.
It is wholly on the Section 106 that is signed at the time and what the triggers are for that money. And unfortunately, that's all part of the negotiation, part of the Section 106 and the planning process, which my team are not that involved with.
Mrs Townsend, I mean, I do sympathise with the problems with Section 106. I've had a particular problem in my division in Dunsfold, where money was allocated for something that basically wasn't possible to do. We have managed to renegotiate it. All I can really say is to urge you, yet another thing for you to do is to be really on it when these developments are going through, to check that the Section 106s say what they should say, because I've discovered that the people drafting them often are totally unfamiliar with the area, and therefore they don't end up saying what they're expected to say. Right, I think Mr Ramsdale.
Thank you, Chairman. I do so dislike this. You seem to get missed in terms of people's eye lines. Can I raise a number of points? First of all, at this last formal meeting, we had this big discussion about the 5K and putting it into a general pot. As you know, I was quite reluctant about doing that because I couldn't see where the traceability would be. I believe I was assured that there would be agreements and I would get feedback on when things were going to happen. And indeed, there'd be an approval process for me. Well, per the records of what's happened so far, nothing's happened because I've had no information and certainly not approved anything to happen. I did have a meeting set up to meet with the different members of Highways, but the people responsible for that category couldn't be there. I understood they were going to contact me afterwards. I think this is a sorry state of affairs. If it stays like this, you certainly won't get my agreement to the 5K in a future year. You can either comment now or I can move on.
I'm very surprised to hear that, because obviously we met with you. You gave us your locations that you felt were necessary. We've gone away with, we're getting prices for those particular locations. And in terms of the vegetation cutback, which is what the £5,000 and £7,500 was going to be spent on, we asked all members that we met that if they wanted to feed into that, then they had the ability to give us lists. Otherwise, provide those locations to the LHO in your particular location, who would instigate that work on your behalf. So each member has got that ability to speak to their LHO if there are particular areas, or to speak to me. And those lists can either, the works that we do, those lists can either be included as part of this report, which identifies what has been done in each individual member. I'm quite happy to include that in there for transparency. But last year, as I explained previously, that money was not held by us. It went directly to the, as approved by the committee, to the parishes and districts as part of the localism. So we had no control last year on how that money was spent, but this year we do. And I can provide you any evidence of expenditure.
I think, Frank, that would be helpful, because I do slightly share Mr Ramsdale some of his concerns. I've had no information about where any of the money in my division has been spent. I accept I haven't given Stuart or anybody a list of saying that I want it in places A, B and C, but it would nonetheless be useful to know that you have cut, you know, certain spots, so that one can at least check with the parishes to see that it has been done and it's been done satisfactorily, and that one can see something is happening. Would that be possible?
Absolutely, and just to clarify, a lot of the locations that we have already received have come directly from the parish councils.
That's good, but perhaps you could let the members know where these places are, because I don't think we do, and I drive around and don't know what I should be looking for. Mr Gray.
Thank you. I'll be very quick. Re the cutting. I had in and around Dunsfold, the sight lines and the edges were cut. They were cut, I think, by Waverley on behalf of Surrey, which is the response I got. Within 5 weeks, the parish had to come and recut it. It was cut too early, and I understand that that there is not a coordination between who does it, and certainly not with the parish. So if we could improve that, I think it would help considerably.
If we're talking about grass cutting, that's done by Waverley on our behalf directly.
Chairman.
Right, if I could come back on that. I'm told that Waverley don't tell you when they're doing it. So not only you've got to agree with them, the timing is very critical, certainly on the common area that we have in terms of the growth and what we ourselves cut.
We literally have agency agreements with them whereby they determine what they feel is the best way of carrying that process out.
Right, I think, Mr Ramsdale, we kind of interrupted you and slightly hijacked your questions.
Again. Going back to that first point, what Frank's just repeated to us was the original offer made to me. I said I needed to know in advance, and I'm certainly not getting anything in advance, since I'm not at the moment getting any information at all. To get the information as to what's being done would be a step improvement, but I'm looking for a bit more if you want the money another year. The Section 106 funds that are identified here, and I'm repeating myself, I'm afraid, doesn't include the monies that have been promised from the Board and Development to be spent in Surrey, in particular on roads like the A325 and the A31. It doesn't quite meet Councillor Coss's ambitions of 5 million, but at 1.1 million, it's certainly big enough to warrant putting on these pages. And I, for one, and I would have thought this would apply to my fellow councillors in the Farnham area, would really like to be confident that what's going to happen to that money, and that we can see it happen, and be talking to people about the detail of it, and especially if there's some choices involved. So can we please include that? The third area I just wanted to talk about is briefly two areas where I think you're muddling pick and sill. If you look at page 17, paragraph 2.112, sorry, it implies that we've gone from PIC funding and suddenly switched on SIL funding. Actually, in terms of time periods, there was a gap. There was a gap when all we were using was section 106. If you look, please, at page 18 at 2.1.19, it talks about section agreements still being possible or ceasing with the section of any large strategic sites. I don't believe that's correct. I think in theory at least, any site could have a section 106 where it was required to have development work specific to the site, not just making a contribution to the overall infrastructure. So if you're going to put these bits in, can you please check with, say, Waverley Planning Department or something like that as to how it's actually being done? And indeed, I think if more of that was done, some of the questions we've had about how does PIC work, how does SIL work, when will the infrastructure delivery plan be available, wouldn't be needed, because there would be material contained here. Thank you.
Those comments I obtained direct from Transportation Development Planning, as I do the lists. So if the board and lists are on there and not on there, as you're saying, then Transportation Development Control, for whatever reason, have not included them. There may be a good reason why they're not on that list. But going back to 2119, that was my understanding that in future all Section 106s will only be for large specifics. So if Dunsfold came in now, then there could potentially be a Section 106 for that. But there wouldn't be any other 106s going forward. I may have misunderstood that.
Well, in Farnham certainly, and potentially across the Weldon Heath area as well, we have section 106s for the Thames Basin Heath contributions, and virtually all of the applications have section 106s, but you would be right to say that there's no transport element in those section 106s, but it's totally wrong what's actually written here, but I don't know how much that matters.
Thank you, Mr. Merriweather.
Yeah, my understanding is that the 106s will continue, but they will only be applicable within the boundaries of the development and nothing outside.
Sorry, Mr.
I was just saying my understanding was that 106s may continue, but the funds will only be attributable to works inside the boundaries of the development and nothing outside.
Right.
It's specific to the site, but it could be adjacent to the site, not just inside the boundary.
Okay, I'm keen to move to the recommendations. Mrs. Baker, I know you're signalling to me. Is it very quick?
Very quick. I'm looking at the forward programme, which is really a background paper. But could you just indulge me and could I just be told when the drainage improvements are going to be started at Milford, and when is the feasibility study going to be commenced?
Which
It's
page?
the coloured chart, which is the forward programme.
Oh, this. Well, there's no dates set forward for any of these. I don't think they are just that those are that is the prioritised list of projects for this committee. As and when we get money, they will be worked through. I can't. I mean, your
number
item.
16. It's number. They're both number 16 towards the bottom.
I wouldn't hold your breath.
Oh well, in that case, could I say through the committee that residents of Milford should continue to wear their Wellingtons and their galoshes, because last week it was absolutely dreadful down there with all the heavy rain, and I understand that there is a problem with a culvert being blocked. So could that be looked at as an emergency, please?
I think that's something you could raise separately with Adrian and Frank outside of this meeting. We take that offline. Oh, no. You report it. Right, we now need to move to the recommendations, please, on page 15. The local committee has asked 1, to note the committee approved allocations and works being progressed during 2019-20. Is that approved?
Agreed.
And to approve the commencement of the statutory consultation to enable a bus stop, etc.
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Mr Ramsdale.
I'd like to add a third recommendation, which is that the committee notes the need for improved information in the way this report is prepared.
Mr Ramsdale, could you be a bit more specific about that? Because that's very general.
Well, I think a number of us have said this doesn't look right, it doesn't read right. I've been specific about the section 106 in Boughton, which I'd asked for previously to be included. It may be that it's not Frank's team's area, but you know, when we've said this is not there and should be, I would have expected some feedback on that. I think there's errors to do with the description of sill and pick that shouldn't appear. No, I'm just asking for it to be done better next time. And the spending of the way the 5K is mentioned, I think, is incorrect in here. And I've explained my concerns.
We'll note your points, and I certainly have, you know, I'm keen that the information given is accurate and helpful, you know, as absolutely as far as it can be. We've noted this, and I do agree with you that just because it's been provided by a different team or something doesn't excuse it being wrong. Mr. Plummer.
Can I just say how grateful I am to Frank for having pulled the data together. So this is an information exercise, and he's pulled as much as he can together in a way that we've not seen it before, and I'm very grateful for that. Now, there are lots of complications about spending the money and the process and the timetable and so forth, but that wasn't part of the business of pulling it all together. He's pulled it together in what I think is a terrific way, and I'm very grateful for him for that.
Thank you. Mr. Cossa?
Yeah, just briefly, I share what Councillor Martin said, but I do also have some sympathy with what's been said by Councillor Ramsdale. I always found for many, many years that one of the real difficulties in trying to understand Section 106 and all those things was that information is held in development control, and we would often receive reports at this committee which our highways managers had done their very best to collate and pull together, but they were largely reporting them second-hand. I tried to facilitate on a fairly regular basis meetings between our highways engineers and development control. That proved quite difficult on occasions to do, and it's just of concern to me that some years on there still appears to be an information deficit. We don't seem to have, I don't know, maybe you've been doing it for the last 2 years while I haven't been here, the opportunity to talk directly to the development control people, because a lot of this information is critically held by them. They take decisions, sometimes without any consultation at all, in my experience, about how these Section 106 agreements should be drawn up, and then we deal with the consequences in this committee for many years to come. And that accountability loop doesn't seem to be there. Our highways managers are here every time, and we can say, yeah, we're not happy with this, and thank you for that, and we're comfortable with that. But we never seem to see regularly the development control people. Could we?
I certainly would take that back, ask Matt to take that back as a point. That
Sorry.
No,
sorry, Chairman. Section 106 is collected by the borough. So in your planning team, you'll have that Section 106 officer who should have a report of all, or at least a spreadsheet of all the monies linked to a development, and hopefully there is also a wish list of what is being allocated along that. I will talk to TDP about the information that's been provided, its accuracy and everything else, and we'll seek to assist on that. But it should be held, we have to get it from you, the money from Surrey. So it would be helpful maybe if you had a chat with your own teams to get that information first.
Chairman, could I just say, I think the problem is further back than that. My concern is that there needs to be some sort of liaison for local members to understand what's being negotiated. It's at the stage when TDP are going to negotiate, or they're recommending negotiation. Generally, they're doing it themselves, actually, with the developer, and then giving it to Waverley, because TDP are the statutory consultee, but by that time it's too late, actually. I mean, it'd be nice to know what they did wrong, but you see what I mean? But by that, what we really would like to do, you know, to keep the democracy in control and not leave it all to the officers out there, we would like to be involved in understanding what it was that was being proposed and then be able to track it as well. Do you think that's practicable? I mean, do you agree with what I'm saying?
Example, number one on your list for projects is the junction in improvement of Cattershall Lane and along Meadow and so on. I found out when I was the local member some time ago, when I started to ask about the need for this goes back a long way, and where the funding might come from, that a significant sum of money had been allocated by development control, which could have been allocated for this purpose for something like bus stop phase-in or something like that down Cattershall Road, which would never have been my priority as the local member, nor that of local people. And that illustrates quite simply how we get into these difficulties.
Matt, I think you were kind of interrupted.
That's fine. It again comes back to what are you wanting to achieve. Surrey and the TDP will do what they believe needs to be done. Unless you've got any specific ideas and you've actually put together an evidence plan of what you would like to achieve in the area, we will do what is needed. The ideas need to come from you guys, I'm afraid, and the rest of the public and the councillors. We will. How we make it work is another matter, but at the end of the day, you need an idea of what you want to achieve in the area. We will happily start asking for that at that point.
Dr. Povey, quickly.
Very quickly, this Section 106 list that we have is only the highways Section 106. So if we were going to invite perhaps an officer from Waverley to our next meeting to give us an updated list, it would be good to have it that covers the non-highways as well.
That's not totally correct, to be fair. I mean, this is the highway stuff, but there is money as well that's within Waverley, which are for what would be highways projects. So the money is it's really difficult. Honestly, the 100 and whatever thousand that I've been talking about is on a Waverley list, but it's a highways projects for pavements. So it's not on this list. So it really does become totally diluted, and it is important. We need all of these people speaking together because, you know, I've spoken to, when the money's collected by Waverley, Surrey don't seem to know it's collected. They're not aware of the trigger. They're not sure where the money is. You know, it's a mess. It is a mess, and it needs to be sorted. And we've been speaking about this now. I have been banging on about Section 106 monies, as you well know, for nearly 2 years now. So come on, let's grasp this and do something about it.
Yeah, Chairman, I agree with everything that Mrs Townsend has just said, but this list is only the highways list. That's the point I was making. There's money for schools, etc., etc. We need to know it all.
Sorry.
Well, I'm certainly happy to ask Waverley to come. The slight difficulty is as a Surrey committee, Waverley Section 106 officer or whatever, however you would describe them, doesn't have to come. But if people would like them to come, we can certainly ask the question. And there's many of you borough members could perhaps...
Chair, you've taken the question out of order. I wanted to make a point on the same thing. I don't know whether it's appropriate now or whether I let you finish and wave my hand again.
Yeah, Mr Gray, well, I think I've finished anyway. So, Mr Gray, what would you like to say?
Okay, what's very pertinent to the discussion is that Waverley has a new Section 106 system, which is extremely good. It's been brought up to date, but any councillor can go in there for his particular area. He can find the Section 1 agreement. In my case, you can click on all the various types in there, and you can now see it. Now, this is a fantastic move from the Excel spreadsheet that we used to have, which was an absolute nightmare. Those Waverley councillors who haven't looked at it, they really do need to look at it. And this is a lot of work that's been done over the last 6-8 months by a new Section 106 officer. However, I emphasise, go back and support other comments that have been made. and I have specific example of this, is where a Section 106 principles was agreed between the local members and planning. When it was drafted into a Section 106 agreement, it was totally changed. In addition to that, the triggers were inappropriate. Triggers were put in on first occupation where work needed to be done prior to it coming. That is not a Surrey issue, this is a Waverley issue, and we really need to do. Ward members need to see Section 106 agreements on the larger places before they get finalised.
Noted and agreed. Right. Is it really important? Because I would like to move on now, really.
So, firstly, I'd like to apologise. We were just having a side conversation, being a newbie. I'm still not sure what everyone knows and doesn't know, and I was just checking to see whether everyone was aware of the database, because not everybody is, and I'm very happy to send everyone a link. It's a public database. Anyone can go online and find it, and I'd be very happy to do that.
Yes, please. Yes, please. That would be welcome.
All right.
Right here.
Okay.
Thank you.
It is public. Anybody can go online. It's very hard to find unless you do a search.
We'll put it in the minutes. I think that's the best way to deal with it. That's a good idea. Right. So moving on now to items. Thank you. That was useful and important. Then moving to item 11, representation on partnerships and boards. We're being asked to consider a representative on the Safer Waverley partnership. Does anybody wish to ask anything on this? Mr. Hyman?
Yeah, I'd be very happy.
Moving on now to item 10, community safety funding. The officer was unable to attend today. If anyone has any specific questions, Yvette can obtain answers after this meeting. Otherwise, can I ask members please to agree the recommendations? Agreed. Thank you.
To be a representative on that, but I was just considering actually when I was reading this report as to whether or not, because obviously I consider myself with my background quite streetwise and a lot of contacts, and I would very much like to concentrate on antisocial behaviour issues that we have around the borough, and really try and get into those, because they've been around a long time. We don't seem to make an awful lot of progress on them the way that it's being done at the moment. But there is one big question here. These meetings, are they evenings or daytime? Because I have more difficulty with daytime meetings myself at the moment, and it's maybe important to others. I noticed over the page that there's a list of where the members of the SWP executive come from. So, the alternative, of course, would be whether perhaps we had a member from one of the wards which suffers particularly in respect of antisocial behaviour, which would be perhaps Penny Rivers or Andy or Stephen or George Wilson, because of the wards that they have. But I would certainly put myself forward as being very happy to do that, particularly if it's in evening meetings. Thank you.
Mr. Martin.
Thank you. I too am very interested in this. I put my name forward as a potential representative from this group. Thank you.
Mr. Ramsdale, could you just, I know you want to ask a question, but I think you were on it before, and you perhaps clarify when the meetings are held.
The point I was just about to say was, traditionally it's a during the day meeting. I forget whether it's at 10 o'clock or at 2 o'clock, but it's definitely during the day.
Sorry, Mrs. Townsend.
I was just going to say I'm happy to put myself forward as well.
Mr. Wilson?
As am I. We've been having a lot of problems in our ward recently, so I would be interested. And I spent 30 years in the prison service, so I do know a little bit about bad behaviour.
Yeah. Thank you.
I think it's a latter-day John Sandy for us.
I actually worked with John Sandys. When I was doing my training, I kicked him out of the training facility he was visiting during a fire evacuation.
We're going to have to take a vote, aren't we?
Right, so we're going to have to take a vote. So we've...
Carol wants to say something.
Oh, Carol.
So I'm not putting myself forward, you'd be glad to know. I've been on it before. No, it was just I'm confused that we have a proposal, and I came along here expecting to speak to the proposal that Peter Martin is our representative, and I'm quite surprised we're doing it this way. On page 54, there's a proposal, and so I'm just confused of the Bourne, as ever.
Mr. Hyman, could I clarify, are you withdrawing as it's a daytime meeting?
Yes, I'm happy to. I mean, but I hadn't actually seen the proposal over there that Councillor Martin be appointed. I hadn't seen that when I read through it. So so I was saying I was quite happy to if no one else would, but I thought it should be somebody who represented an antisocial, you know, someone with antisocial behaviour, perhaps. But that's my view.
Yes. Okay.
Yes, I will withdraw mine. Thanks.
Okay, so that leaves us with Mr. Wilson, Mrs. Townsend and Mr. Martin. Do we wish to vote on this? Is this the best way to...
Happy to make a proposal that our nomination be Councillor Martin. Perhaps we could vote on that and see where it takes us.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder for that? Thank you, Mrs. Coburn. So all those in favour of Mr. Martin representing the local committee on the Safer Waverley Partnership?
6. I'm not voting.
Thank you. All those against? And abstentions?
Quite a few.
So we've got 7, 4, 9 abstentions.
Carried.
Carried.
Nemcon.
That's carried. Well, thank you all for your interest in this position. Could I just agree the recommendations little 2 and little 3 on page 53?
Allowed or required?
Allowed.
Be careful what you wish for, Councillor.
Okay. Thank you.
Tracker.
So we move now to the decision tracker, which I'm just trying to get to the right page. Page 87. There's a long-standing item to review any outstanding committee decisions. Are there any comments, please? Any comments on page 87 about St Joseph's School on Amlets Lane? Over the page to Potter's Gate School, Farnham, Mrs. Townsend.
Just about the Amlets Lane application. Obviously, the agreement was done, and it's been quite a long time now. I'm being chased by the school, told that it's going to start now, potentially at the end of the year. But is there no option to put a timeline on this actual decision tracker? So that if there's something is being decided, or there is an agreement, that there's just a quick column that you can glance down to see that the, you know, the decision date or roughly when the work is going to be carried out.
Do you have any more information? think it's
Can I
probably
just propose that? I mean, it says open, close. Surely it could just add perhaps a date of when things are being done. It's just really helpful to have a date.
we could include a date in the comments, I think. Mrs. Coburn.
Sorry, just a small point of clarity in the Beavers Road one. It is the Hotfields, but it's now being marketed under Abbey View. The fact that you can't actually see the Abbey from there is, I think, totally irrelevant, and there isn't an Abbey to see anyway. But just that if you call it the Hotfields, you're way out of date. It's now Abbey View.
Thank you for that. We will amend that for
Sorry.
clarity.
Chairman, could we just have an update on, because we won't be discussing this again until September, the other side of the holidays, and it says on page 88, discussions are ongoing with the developer. The developer's not agreed to any Section 106 money earlier than's required than by Section 106 agreement. I know the building's gone up, a lot of building's gone up there. Has there been any progress in that? Are we expecting this to move on over the next few months or not? Would anybody be able to help with that, perhaps?
I don't think we have anybody here who has that in. Adrian, do you have any information?
We haven't been updated from TDP, unfortunately, on negotiations. So.
Thank you very much.
Could I just ask for your agreement that the final item on page 88, the one about Graham Hodgson and the footway in South Hill Godalming, that can now come off the decision tracker, because I think that was all cleared up last time.
Yeah, agreed.
Thank you. Then moving to item 13, the forward programme. Please could you review this and let us know if you have any suggestions for future items. Mr. Cossa.
Sorry, not what you asked. I just have a simple question. These programmes always seem to carry lots of items with dates to be arranged and so on. Is there any way, I think some of these bottom three are actually really quite important issues for this committee, and I just wonder if we'd have some indication of when they might be brought forward.
I think the last 2 or 3 will probably be brought to the next private meeting, and I'm not sure have we actually set a date yet, Yvette? I don't think.
Yes, it's November.
Which is in November.
It's in
for the benefit of new members, are you all clear about the dates that we do have upcoming? Because if not, perhaps Yvette, you could circulate the. Yeah.
There are 2 informals which are held in private in Committee Room 1, and one is in November and one is January. I think it's 8th of November, 7th of November and the 31st of January. Occasionally we arrange an additional private meeting if there's something that everyone feels is urgent to discuss. Yes, I will circulate.
Yeah, certainly we'll get those recirculated. Dr. Povey.
I just wondered, Chairman, in terms of forward programme, in light of some of the discussion today, if we could invite Colin Kemp along to our meeting. I think it's been very successful having Matt here today. Yeah.
No, I think that's a good idea. We always like having Mr. Kemp. We'll ask him again. Thank you. So, if there's no more points, the next meeting is Friday the 27th of September. Same time, same place, and the meeting will start with public questions as normal. And I declare the meeting closed, and thank everybody very much for their time and for attending today. Thank you.
27th of September.
27th of
Yeah,
September.
I thought you said 25th. Yes, no, I've got that. That's a terrible week. Well, Trading Standards meeting in Aylesbury on the 25th. And a couple of audit and governance meetings as well. There you go. That's hard work, wasn't it?
I just wondered where we might be with this
It's a good plan not having any of your own local councillors here. I must remember that.
Oh, do you not have it? Yeah.
No, mine.
No.
Lots of neighbours, but no taste.